Buenas and half a day. This committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning is calling this oversight hearing to order. The time is now 9:18 a.m., Friday, September 29th, 2023. In compliance with open government law, notices of this hearing was published in the Guam Daily Post, provided via email to senators, stakeholders, local media, and posted on the Governor of Guam Public Notices website on Friday, September 22nd for the 5-day notice, and Wednesday, September 27th for the 48-hour notice. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues that are here today, Speaker Therese Terlahi, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Joe San Augustine, Senator Roy Kanata, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Tela Taitagui. The rules of conduct for this hearing are as follows. So we will have the panel be sworn in, so we can have the Sergeant at Arms swear the panel in at this time.
Under penalty of perjury, the all affirm that any and all information provided today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Madam Chair, you're under oath. You may proceed.
So we do have a presentation, and we will integrate questions by my colleagues, by myself and colleagues, as we go through the presentation. Please ensure that questions will be confined to this agenda, which is the oversight of Department of Revenue and Taxation, and no inferences on anybody's intentions or shall be questioned, and we must confine it to the agenda. Okay, so now we will begin the agenda. First of all, I would like to, if the director, Shimizu, if she can introduce the panel that's here today.
Half a day. I'm Daphne Mansip Shimizu, and I'm the director of the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation. And with me today, I have my deputy director.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Marie Lizama, and as the director mentioned, I am the deputy director for the agency.
We also do have some members of our agency who are here, some managers, supervisors in the tax and non-tax areas. There's many of them here. Of course, to observe. And again, as we mentioned, Senator Perez, when I did talk with you, hopefully the ultimate goal is to work to achieve something positive together. So they're here to observe, to make sure they take note. And we talked about making sure that we go back after this to address whatever issues may be brought up so that we can be better. Sidusmasi.
Right, thank you. And then we also have Director Byrne. Everybody probably knows him by now.
Good morning, Senator. Edward Byrne, Director of Administration.
All right, thank you for being here. So now we can start the presentation.
Hi, Senator Perez. Sorry, I just wanted to find out, would it be possible for us to get a copy of the presentation?
Actually, we would like to do more edits on it, but this is kind of like the guidance for today's oversight. Yeah,
right.
But maybe we can provide a draft to the deputy or the director.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're waiting on AV if they can put up the PowerPoint. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I know the font's very small, but this is the agenda. So we'll have introduction. We'll talk about the purpose, the mission of DRT, overview of DRT's performance, and then we'll also do an introduction about a previous report by Department of Interior Inspector General. The next item would be personnel staffing concerns. Under that is staffing levels, recruitment deficiencies, non-competitive hiring practices, overtime, training, lack of successional planning, and then we'll have collection enforcement status issues and updates, and then finally the recommendations. Okay, next slide. Yeah, I'm reading it, yeah. So yeah, the purpose and intention of this oversight, or the importance of this oversight, is to highlight key personnel issues that are foundational to the effectiveness, sustainability and resiliency of the agency. Some of the key issues that have been reported to my office involve a myriad of concerns, lack of adequate staff, inconsistent pay increases that do not appear to be merit-based, management's inadequate response to the needs of the employees, irregular internal communications, process for bringing concerns and needs has been discouraged. And these decisions and actions has exacerbated the recruitment and retention by the agency. Furthermore, it has affected morale and impacts performance of DRT in fulfilling its mandates. It is critical that DRT recognize and address these issues in a concerted way to ensure effectiveness of the department to fulfill its mission and responsibilities in order to sustain the organization and its employees. Next slide. Okay, the Department of Revenue and Taxation's mission statement is to apply and enforce licensing laws with integrity, fairness, and encourage voluntary compliance by educating customers to enhance and maintain public confidence. On this slide is the organizational chart. We have at the top is governor, and then under that is director, and then it breaks down into different departments. So it's a pretty large organization with a lot of different mandates and responsibilities. DRT, so Guam's income tax system generally mirrors the federal tax system. The Organic Act provides that the income tax laws enforced in the United States shall be the income tax laws of Guam, substituting Guam for the United States where necessary, and omitting any inapplicable or incompatible provisions. The U.S. Internal Code with appropriate changes therefore constitute the Guam Territorial Income Tax Law. Taxes imposed by Guam include business privilege taxes and real property taxes and are assessed and collected in accordance with Title 11 Guam Code annotated. So just an overview of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. The core responsibilities include the following: collecting taxes, processing tax returns, assisting taxpayers, enforcing tax laws, investigating tax crimes, and of course they have a regulatory arm which is to regulate insurance and banking, sale of tobacco, alcohol, cannabis now. So in our most recent budget, which was totaled over 1.1 billion, Department of Revenue and Taxation collected 72% of the revenues that have come into the government. And so they're a key and important agency for our island to ensure that the services are provided that we depend upon. I'd also like to recognize the Herculean task that this department has gone through during the pandemic. They carried through pretty important pandemic-related economic relief to our island almost at an instant. And it was a very trying time. They've also implemented the reimbursement, so now ACTC and CTC reimbursements. They've also increased automation, through income tax e-filings, mandatory BPT online filings, and renewals for registration and license. So there has been a lot of improvements and accomplishments for Department of Revenue and Taxation. So some of the statistics that were provided at a budget hearing by DRT. So this shows basically the increase in filings over the years. So the amount of workload has increased. And this was at a previous, next slide. My apologies, we're 2 slides behind. Okay, there. So yeah, this slide basically shows the upward trending of the workload at the Department of Revenue and Taxation in regards to income tax filings. And so this is a key as we go into the oversight. Next slide, please. And so accompanying that previous slide is the amount of returns. And so this is the amount of returns that were processed and paid in the same period of time. So again, and now they're doing it at a quickened pace of for every error-free tax filing, they're putting it out in a month's time, or that's the goal, internal goal. And this is the amount of money that has been paid out. So these are three are in together. 111 million to our people, which is very critical. Again, this shows the changes as far as electronic filings. So these are the improvements within the department. So to pivot a little bit, so now the point of this oversight is to look at the functioning of DRT. So we're coming out of a pandemic phase, and now we're looking at DRT as a whole. So there are some gaps that were notified or noticed or reported in a 2008 U.S. Department of Interior, and I know that's decades old, but I think a lot of this resonates today. So in that finding, in their report, it stated that DRT is hamstrung by the lack of inadequate funding. Sorry, next slide, please. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, so the 2008 U.S. Department of Interior Inspector General report stated that DRT is hamstrung by the lack of adequate funding and staff, an inability to hire and retain qualified tax enforcement officers, an ever-increasing workload, a reliance on manual processes and outdated equipment. It stated, according to regarding staffing, DRT's authorized staffing levels have dropped significantly. They do not have enough staff to review past and current returns and to adjust those needing corrections. In addition, they are continually faced with special projects. At this point, there was a delay in refunds processing, which we have addressed. And so, and then moving down to hiring and retention, DRT cannot offer competitive salaries to attract and retain highly qualified employees. It states that once DRT provided specialized tax training to employees, many leave for high-paying jobs elsewhere. Next slide. The other findings of that decades-old report states that DRT's workload continues to grow while its funding and staffing shrink. So as of the past 3 years, I'm thankful that DRT's budget has been increasing, so this has changed since then. In regards to equipment, DRT's computers, software-related equipment are old and antiquated. And so this also, there has been a change since then as far as the online automation efforts, but I am still getting concerns regarding the overall automation of the agency. Okay, so now we move into the next part of our PowerPoint, which is the staffing. So in regards to that U.S. Department of Interior report, it mentioned that staffing was an issue. And so now we're going to look at what's currently happening today. Next slide. And so this is the overall numbers that we collected since 2008. And so we'll put this up in a graphic form. Next slide.
Excuse me, Senator, can we get a copy? We can't see any of this.
We would like to, well, yeah, we can provide copies. Yeah. Okay, so this one basically shows the total employees in the bar graphs. So you'll see total employees from 2008 on the left side, moving on to the right till present day, present year. And within each, so the lines represent the different divisions. So the total employees is the bar graph. And then you have the red line, sorry, the red executive. So executive direction is the dark blue line, which, yeah, basically it shows the composite of the different divisions. And we'll go down each individually. But ultimately, the point is the total employees from 2008 was 158, and currently it's 173. That might be a little different today. And the breakdown currently is, of the 173, 61 are in the executive office, 16 are in tax enforcement, 30, sorry, hold on. So amongst the total employees, 61 is in the executive office, and then we have 36 in tax enforcement total. Taxpayer services is 29. Real property, 10. Regulatory, it states here 18, and motor vehicle, 19. Next slide. And so within the executive office, it breaks it down even further. So the bar graph on the left is the director's office, which is the red. The next one is, moving to the right, is passport. The next one is systems and program support. The next one is technical research and appeals. And then we have a new one, call center, in the years 2022 and 23. And then the total is in the blue line. And so as you can see, the dramatic increase in the director's office and a decrease in technical research and appeals. So there's some pretty much status or stagnant levels of if not decrease in levels of staffing from the different divisions within the executive director's office. So the huge increase in the director's office, but in the other parts, as far as passport, systems, programming, technical research and appeals bureau, call centers, the ones new, has remained stagnant for the most part, if not decreased. So in regards to the technical research and appeals bureau, it's an impartial, independent appeals system. They're responsible to the director. The function is to hold hearings, resolve tax disputes, provide technical guidance to taxpayers and personnel, provide research to the director upon request, and assist the Attorney General in preparation for civil tax cases and litigation. Next slide. Yeah, they're making. Yeah, their copies are being made. Okay, so back in 2019, so next slide, please. So I want to focus on some areas where there's a decrease in staffing, and generally, with the decrease in staffing, the correlation is a decrease in services and a decrease in, perhaps performance as well. And so this information was provided by Technical Research and Appeals back in 2019. And I know there's some information that doesn't seem quite right, but if you can focus on, so the first line, it talks about original assessment and final assessment. So when a case is brought to TRAB, Technical Research and Appeals Bureau, there's a dispute, and then they resolve the dispute. And so with the GRTs, in 2019, original assessments was 18 million. Final assessments agreed was 0. So basically, there was no collection.
Madam Chair, can we get a copy of what you're presenting up there to the people, Guam? We're getting a copy of the Department of Interior's report, and I'm trying to read this. I'm even looking at the YouTube. It is not clear.
Okay, so we'll continue, but I'll continue to read it out loud, so if you can follow at least with what I'm saying, then as you know, the copies will be brought to you. So with the GRT, it shows the assessments from 18 million to 0. And perhaps, Director, can you explain to the public what happened in 2019?
So, thank you, Senator Perez. With regards to this slide, and thank you for showing it, as you know, when you did send it to me, I did actually email back because, one, we were concerned about the source of the data, and two, our Technical Research and Appeals Bureau Administrator had significant concerns about the data here. It's incomplete. It's not clear, actually, again, who actually provided it to you. So we actually have concerns of the validity of the data and how, I guess, how accurate it is. So it's hard for me to speak on it because, as I mentioned in my email to you the other day, that we're concerned about, again, the correctness of this information. I can't validate it, and our tribe administrator has advised that she does not recall this information.
Okay, so what is your current data now?
And that's something, again, ma'am, as you know, and I did talk with you Tuesday about this. You know, we did receive the notification on Friday about the oversight. And so what we did provide to you today was what we were able to gather, at least as far as your information request. So we do have that. I'm not sure if you have copies of that that's included here. But what we did try to provide, because again, a lot of it was very detailed. So we did try to provide whatever we could, again, ahead of this. But that information, one, we're not sure the source. Two, we're not sure if it's accurate. And so we have concerns, and again, I can't speak to that because, as I've been advised, we don't know where it came from.
All right, so is the administrator here, the tribe administrator here?
She's not here.
And do you have one? Do you have a tribe administrator?
So what we did have, of course, as you know, or you may know, our TRAB administrator retired in September 2022, and she was gone for a little bit, but our law, the Budget Act allows for us to hire retirees. The law allows for us to hire retirees, so we did bring her back, and so she actually does work with us. But again, we did meet with her on this data. She was working to try to gather some actual TRAB data, again, as I mentioned to you. But this actually, so I know you had sent a couple of different things. You sent something Friday, then I think you sent something Monday, and then maybe you sent this particular slide either yesterday or 2 days ago, maybe. So when I provided that to her, she was very surprised, and again, she didn't know what the source was, and she didn't think the numbers were accurate. So I can't speak to it. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that leads to my question. That kind of leads to one of my conclusions is that without the staff, because you didn't fill this position, so this person retired in 2022. When did this administrator come on?
I
when
believe
did you fill that position?
April 2023.
Okay, so
I believe around April.
So that's one of the points I'm trying to make is that without the staff, you're unable to fulfill these key core responsibilities, which is, first of all, so during the time there was an absence, were there any tax disputes that had to be assessed?
You know, so Senator Perez, thank you. I guess there's a couple pieces to your question. Your primary concern perhaps seems to be an issue of resources. And we absolutely agree that there's an issue with resources. And in fact, what's great is, one, I'm very grateful for the Department of Administration and their HR team. And of course, they have a new deputy director who has been in charge of personnel. I was communicating with her this morning because I wanted to make sure that the numbers that we have in terms of GG1s that are outstanding that are with DOA is correct. So our number actually was 37, but their number was 34, and the reason is because actually there was 3 people that were hired recently. So with regards to recruitment, it's exciting that we're going to be probably having about 34 more people. And the issue.
So let's go back to the data.
Okay.
So original assessment, what is that? Can you just explain to the general public what is an original assessment? Final assessment agreed. Unassessed. So how is Technical Research and Appeals Bureau, how do they deal with these
And I'm very
tax issues?
sorry, ma'am, I can't speak to this slide because, again, we have a problem with this slide.
But in general,
and I can't speak to this because that's not my specific area, again.
So you have no understanding of how Technical Research and Appeals Bureau operates?
I do understand how
Okay.
Technical
Can
Research
you-
and
can you
Appeals
explain
operates, but
what
this
is-
particular slide, we believe, maybe is
Okay, so as
not
far
correct.
as data, so in your conversation with the current TRAB administrator, did she provide any data as of today as far as original assessments, final assessments,
No.
unassessed? So
No.
is there any data whatsoever that exists?
She did work on trying to provide some data regarding their activities, but not necessarily dollar figures like this. And again, as I
So
mentioned.
did she provide you Because she's responsible to the director.
Right.
And
Yes.
so did she come up in these 2
Not-
days?
Not with this type of data, ma'am, and
So
what
how
it is.
long will it take to get that data?
I would have to get back to you. I would do our best, as we mentioned, but again, we were doing our best to try to provide it. And this particular slide that you provided, you didn't provide in last
Yes,
Friday.
so I want to clarify, we did get this from the administrator at the time, and we did question the results.
Okay,
And so that data came from Department of Revenue and Taxation.
okay.
But the fact remains that you don't have data today.
I
And
don't have this data for you,
in
ma'am.
reference, I mean, you had a conversation with the administrator.
Correct.
But you don't have information for the oversight.
I don't have the information for this, and as I mentioned, as I emailed you, ma'am, we are doing our best to pull whatever data we have. We did provide you this morning, and I did call you early this morning to tell you we were going to transmit it. And whatever data that we were able to provide, we'd actually already provided to you this morning.
Yeah, so this wasn't part of it.
That
So
was not
we
part of it.
definitely will seek this information. Is it true that the technical research administrator is acting as a deputy tax commissioner today?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so is that a conflict of interest? Because the deputy tax commissioner oversees tax enforcement division, taxpayer services, it oversees TRAB, and so how can the deputy tax commissioner also oversee the work of the TRAB administrator?
I think this is an absolutely great question. I'm so glad you asked it. So with regards to any type of conflict of interest, there's always mechanisms for ensuring that there is some type of credibility in the process. And, you know, of course, as I did talk with her and actually work to detail her as acting deputy tax commissioner, that's, of course, a discussion that has to be had. Now, I perhaps can't describe exactly how it all kind of works, but again, there's always going to be a mechanism, and I rely on my team to make sure that they are properly operating. They're the technical tax experts, and they're very well aware of what their responsibilities are. So again, although there may be, or you may see it, or some information was given to you as maybe this is a concern, ma'am, in terms of any conflict of interest, whether it's, again, I mean, I'm sure Edward or Director Byrne could attest to this even in accounting, there's always mechanisms for addressing conflicts of interest.
Okay, so Director Byrne, I guess you were brought into this conversation. Can you talk about, so basically, how was this deputy tax, so is the TRAB administrator, sorry, maybe this question is for the director. Can the TRAB administrator also act as simultaneously as a tax commissioner, a deputy tax commissioner?
Well, so of course, as you mentioned, the TRAB administrator or TRAB must be separate. So definitely, if there is an issue, I guess, that needs to be addressed in terms of appeals, there has to be a process for ensuring that there is some type of separation. And again, you know, our team, they're the experts, ma'am. Our TRAB administrator, she retired, so obviously she had many years of service, decades of service. I rely on her, I rely on our tax team to make sure that if and when there are conflicts, and we do, you know, of course, have to uphold the IRC, we have to uphold.
The question was, can they serve both positions at the same time, simultaneously?
I believe that it is possible in some areas,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
So let me ask the director, is that compliant to rules and regs of government of Guam, that a person can occupy two positions simultaneously? And how does that work?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I think I should make one thing clear before I specifically answer your question, is that when DOA gets requests for detailed appointments, DOA looks at the suitability and qualifications of that employee for the position for which he or she is being detailed. The question of the organization is a question for the agency itself. I don't think that DOA would necessarily know that anybody was serving in a dual role. To my knowledge, there is actually no prohibition on serving in a dual role, but there is obviously a general theme in the rules and regulations that there should be no conflicts of interest. And unless one has been identified, and according to Director Shimizu, there isn't one, DOA would not be concerned. It would be concerned if that were brought to its attention.
So just to confirm, there's nothing prohibiting an employee to serve two positions simultaneously?
No, there isn't, and indeed there are, in the government-wide staffing patterns, there are a few actual examples of, especially actually in the Attorney General's office, of that actually happening.
And if I might add, Senator Perez, for example, in our office, we used to have a separate position called disclosure officer, and then a separate person that was a taxpayer service administrator. When we lost our disclosure officer many years ago, even prior to me coming on board, the disclosure officer responsibilities actually became the taxpayer service administrator's responsibilities, and the taxpayer service administrator serves as both the disclosure officer and the taxpayer service administrator, and we do not have a separate person. That it's one person. So that's, again, my answer.
Okay, then how is pay determined, Director Byrne? What is the pay? You know, if somebody's serving two roles, how is the pay determined for that person?
If an employee is detailed to a particular role, they will be paid the higher of the role that they're either occupying or being detailed to.
And when does that kick in? Automatically when they're appointed?
The process is for the agency to apply to DOA for the detail to be approved as of a certain date. That detail is reviewed, and if approved, it would be as of the date of application. The pay would start at the date of application. The detailed appointment has a limit of 90 days, but an agency can reapply for a further 90 days at the expiration of the initial 90 days, and generally that extension is granted unless there are circumstances, extraordinary circumstances, but I can only recall that happening in a very, very, very few occasions.
Okay, so it has to be applied for, but is it retroactive?
Well, it's applied for as of a certain date, and it takes DOA a while to review the qualifications, because along with that application comes a substantial amount of documents documenting the qualifications for that individual to fulfill that role, and that has to be assessed just like any other application. The operative date, though, is the date of application, and the employee would be paid beginning either the date of application or the date that they start that particular appointment, whichever is later.
Okay, so in the example that you provided, Director Shimizu, you said there was a time when an employee served two roles, disclosure officer and tax administrator. But these are not the highest classified positions, and we're dealing with now, this particular question is about management positions. So we're talking about tax commissioner, deputy tax commissioner, and a TRAB administrator.
To clarify, Senator Perez, if you look at our staffing pattern, which you did actually put up earlier, our org chart, so we have about 180 to 200 employees. The taxpayer service administrator is probably one of the top 7, sorry, so we have 6, 7, 8, 9, top 9 people, or 10 now, if you include the insurance and banking commissioner in our office. So it's how it works is there's the director, then there's the deputy director, and below the deputy director is the 6 administrators. The taxpayer service administrator is actually probably they have the majority of the tax people that fall under them. It's a huge responsibility, and it actually is a high-level management responsibility or area. So, the taxpayer service administrator reports directly to the deputy tax commissioner. They're like one of our top executive areas in our branch.
So,
I mean, I'm sorry, in our agency.
all right, so we're going to move on to, I guess, maybe I'll open it up to my colleagues. If there's any questions at this point regards to Technical Research and Appeals Bureau and the Director's Office. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you. I just want to ask if you're saying that the information that the senator's providing is inaccurate, but you have no information of your own, how do you know that it's inaccurate? It doesn't make sense to me. And if she presented that to you and you had an issue with it, why don't we have any accurate information to use today if that's what your contention is?
No, thank you, Speaker Terlahi, for asking that question. You know, we did receive this maybe a few nights ago, and I guess, you know, kind of in general, you know, you may know, like, for example, you can eyeball something, you can kind of just tell generally if that's your area, if the numbers look right or don't look right. The first kind of inclination, I guess, that the tribe administrator had was that it was not correct, and she didn't know where the information came from, and
Well,
so
where
there
it
was
came
concern.
from is irrelevant if you know what the accurate information is. So that's all we want to know is if you're saying it's wrong, so what's accurate? Did it go from 18 million to 0 or not in 2019?
Ma'am, I can't tell you that because, again, we believe that this information is not correct, and so
So
we
you're
would
saying
have,
it did not?
I don't know. I can't tell you, ma'am.
I mean, if it's not correct, then that's what you're saying. You're denying that it went from 18 million to 0 in 2019.
So what I'm telling you is, one, as I mentioned to Senator Perez in an email that I sent to her, when she sent this information, I confirmed that we received it, but I also
said
advised
it's
that
inaccurate.
we had concerns about the data, and I did ask, you know, what is the source at that time, a couple nights ago, because I wasn't sure.
What's your source? Where would you get the data?
We would get it from our administrator, but again,
Right,
she's
so
been.
why don't we have
I'm
it?
sorry, I don't have the data, ma'am. She believes that it doesn't look right just based on looking at it, just from
All right,
reasonableness.
I'm just saying, you know, Daphne, normally
Okay.
you come in here with all your data. And especially if you're on notice that this is the data we're going to talk about and you think it's inaccurate, to come in here and simply say it's inaccurate without bringing what you think is accurate data, it seems like, I don't know, like we're not trying to get to the accuracy of any information here. We're just trying to impede progress. And I think it's a valid, very valid data that we need and information that we should be talking about. So
If I may, though,
when
Speaker
you-
Terlahi, might I say something? I did actually advise Senator Perez since Tuesday that we were concerned about trying to provide all the data that was requested because there was quite a lot and it was very detailed. And I did advise, and she did actually ask,
you were
though.
concerned, and so you're
since-
just saying, I know, so you're saying today, you're repeating that you're not able to bring the data, you think it's
We-
inaccurate, but you won't deny or confirm whether it went from 18 million to 0 in 2019. That's really significant.
But
That's
ma-
like a,
yeah.
it's,
Ma'am, I can't speak on something that
okay, and then you
I-
didn't bring the administrator. That's the other thing.
So we could provide as I mentioned to
I
Senator
mean, and you're
Perez-
saying she doesn't have the data anyways. I don't know, that's,
Okay.
okay, I don't want to argue with you. I'm just telling you how it looks to me and that it's not conducive to getting to the truth of what actually happened. We're not here to argue whose data is correct. If you've got better data, then let's have it. Let's see it. That's all.
Thank you,
And
Speaker.
and I guess just for that point, I do want to know why it would have moved that way. And I think that was the original question asked to you. Why would it have gone from 18 million to 0 in 1 year? That's all.
Okay. Thank
So,
you,
and
Speaker.
we don't have the answer to that
I don't have an
today.
answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator, I'll do it by order. Sorry, Senator Joanne Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, I think it would be helpful. I don't know if we have to come back another day, but trying to review the information here and then looking at this interior report, which we just received, that's dated in 2008, it might be helpful if we can see how we can address appropriate numbers so that we're all on the same page, and then, you know, we can go from there. It's a little difficult to ask at this point on my part, not quite knowing what to refer to that we have confidence with or we can have concurrence with, but I don't have any questions at this point, but maybe we can work on getting that so that we can collectively have something that we're looking at. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barnett, if you have any questions at this time regarding technical research.
I just generally would like to echo the comments of the speaker. Like, you know what we're here for, and to call out the data that the committee has and not provide data that you believe is accurate, I think is, I don't want to say disingenuous, Daph, but it does hinder the progress that we're trying to achieve here. But I would just ask generally, because they were talking about increased hiring in the director's office, how does this benefit the services for the public who go to Department of Revenue and Tax? Because as I'm sure you're well aware, it takes months to renew a driver's license, passport office also that has issues. So just kind of across the board, I just hear from the constituents that they're very concerned about how time-consuming it is to avail of the services at DRT. And I get it. I mean, you guys got a really great, hard-working staff, but I'm just concerned about where we're putting these employees. Are we putting them in the right spot, or are these just warm bodies? And how does that, all this hiring benefit the services that the public avails of?
Thank you, Senator Barnett. So thank you for that. With regards to, I guess, where or the allocation of the employees, perhaps the way that we had indicated in our budget may be a little bit misleading. Because if you have ever come to our office and you go to the actual director's office, there's not 40 people. Probably there's about 10 to 12 people. And so really, again, the allocation of them on paper is actually not the same as how they are allocated if you actually physically go to our agency. And really, although perhaps maybe some people may be shown as in executive director's office, I will tell you, if you come to our office, to our director's office, and you're welcome to come, there's really probably about only 12 people. So the reality is those people who may be seen in our staffing pattern as under director's office, it's really that the majority of them are not in our director's office. They're actually in exactly the places where I think you would hope they would be, which is driver's license, which is business license, which is our tax branches. So again, although perhaps it's allocated like that in our budget, the physical location for those people is not in the executive, it's not in the director's office.
Thank you for that, Daphne. Have you made any efforts to process GG1s to open positions for tax examination?
Absolutely. So in fact, I believe we have about 5 examination positions currently that are over at Department of Administration, and I did confirm with Deputy Director Lisa Fisher. So we have currently, actually more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tax examination supervisor, 2 revenue agent 3s, 2 revenue agent 1s, and 2 tax auditors. So we do have 7, but again, this 34 that we have currently there. We had 37. We were able to actually make selections for 3, which is why our number is 37 currently, but they have 34. I'm excited because what we're seeing out of the Department of Administration HR division is we're actually seeing packets, we call them packets, but it's really the list for interviewing coming more quickly. So I want to thank them because I know they've been working very hard. But again, these are 37, total of 34, hopefully new people that we're going to be able to bring on board, either bring on board or if it's open recruitment or if it's departmental, be able to promote. And that's, again, very important to our team. So we have 7 currently in our examination branch. That is actually at the Department of Administration. But this is not, I'm sorry, it's not the last that we're going to be sending for examination, though. We know that there is a need there.
Thank you, Daphne. That's all. Those are all the questions I have on this topic, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. So we just want to focus on the Director's Division. We will be talking about tax enforcement and other divisions. So we'll open up questions as we go along. So I'd like to recognize Senator Taitigui if she has questions regarding the Director's Office as well as TRAB.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Daphne, I've been receiving some calls and emails from constituents on Rev and Tax. All in all, the agency is very good at providing, the information needed and good customer service, pretty much. However, there is one section, that I'm constantly hearing constituents complain about. So as a director, do you receive any complaints from constituents, and have you in the last week or two? And if it is, what is the main complaint that you're receiving in your office?
Senator Taitigui, if I may, I'll go ahead and take that answer or that question. Yes, we have received complaints from the public. I would venture to say that most of the complaints are relative to the driver's license, branch. We are constantly trying to implement procedures and processes so that, we are able to better handle, the crowd that comes there. I think, that particular branch, though we have received, compliments, and so forth, we are doing our best with regard to trying to automate certain things. We're trying to leverage our membership in AMVA, which is the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. We are trying to move ahead with regard to perhaps implementing or automating other things. We do have, it's a constant work in progress. If you were to compare, to be fair, if you were to take a look at jurisdictions across the nation, you will find that we are not the only ones struggling with long waits. With that said, we are not wanting to be like anywhere else. We try to serve the people as fast as we can, particularly those who are either you have disabilities or are menumco, right? Because it's difficult to stand or what have you, and nobody really wants to spend the entire day over at the driver's license branch. But we do our best to address the issues or the complaints as soon as we can, and sometimes too it's a matter of just trying to identify or perhaps improve the communication between our staff and the public. Is it a matter of policy? Is it a matter of practice? And so as we work toward that, we do hope that you'll see, a lot more, improvement in that area.
Okay. Yeah, driver's license. Yeah, I can imagine on that side. But the one that I've been receiving is having to do with the GRT section. And, we still have some of our, seniors who are still working, thank goodness, and they're not as computer literate as the younger generation. Some of us get very frustrated with it. However, they're being given, the cold shoulder, or they're told that, go online and check it out. And the problem is that they don't understand, the setup. And it was not the first time or the second time, but it was just that one particular agency in your department, the GRT, where the customer service has been very, not up to par, put it that way. And then also, I had another constituent saying that in that section again, where somebody was behind GRT and they noticed a friend, and then they'll call that friend to the side and saying, hey, what can I do to help you? And take their friend to the front of the line. Now, of course, you're hearing these things. To me, there's three sides to the story: his, hers, and the truth. So you've got to look at those, and you've got to find some way to have somebody within the agency to actually go around and see how the customer services are working. But I'm bringing this to your attention in hopes that you'll look at the GRT section of your department, because those are the complaints that I'm getting as well.
Yes, and if I may add to that,
Sure.
So thank you for bringing that to our attention. It is no secret we have been open about the fact that that particular branch, there is a high turnover rate. We've struggled for the longest time to even hire a supervisor, and when we finally had one who had applied and was ready to take on the role, she had to retire. But with that said, we've just recently, and thanks in part to DOA, we've recently been able to fill or convert two, unclassified or LTA position. They were LTAs, and then the openings, were posted, and they were able to apply for, interview, and then get hired, there. So we're hoping that we're going to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And with regard to customer service and so forth, what we have started to do is we have started to hold some of these like informational or kind of workshops, if you will. We started with code of conduct. And you know, I think I want to say we're about 95% complete with regard to employees taking that. There are just a few, you know, those who are either on an extended leave of absence due to the military or perhaps on sick leave. But yes, we are absolutely aware of it. We appreciate that. And I just kind of want to thank, you know, the senators who were instrumental in trying to, or to mandate that the BPT returns are filed online, because that has taken a huge, you know, load off the staff's shoulders. With regard to, you know, pulling people, you know, I wouldn't know, if there must have been a good reason for that, but I can't speak to that, given that, you know, I was not there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, you definitely will hear from me again. I'll give you a couple
Okay.
weeks, and if I get the same information, I will give you a call on that. But it's refreshing to know, and I will share that information to those constituents.
Yes.
But again, even though it is mandated by law to file online, you're going to have some people come in there, and I just hope
Yeah.
that your staff is going to be accommodating.
And
to
we
them.
we do have people
Okay.
who actually come and help. Of course, we can't, you know, kind of hold their hand or type it in for them, you know, and so forth. You know, it is something that we're continually trying to improve upon.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kanata.
No comments at this time. I think my comments relevance are later on in the presentation, hopefully. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator. Senator San Agustin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, it's no secret, I'm former revenue and tax employee, so I'm quite familiar with what goes on over there, and I visit you guys pretty much like every quarter. And the reason for that is because as the appropriation, government operation and appropriation, I'm very concerned what goes on in revenue and tax. And you know, when I'm looking at this slide on Technical Research and Appeals Bureau, 2019, can you guys tell us what happened in 2019 and up to date? Like somebody retired, somebody died? So that everybody can
sure.
understand what's going on in that bureau, because I know for a fact who's in there today
Yep.
and what's been going
Sure.
on and what it takes to move this bureau
Right.
forward.
Thank you so much, Senator. And just to share, so in our agency, I think since I have been there, we have had several people unfortunately pass away, perhaps I think around 7. One person actually, she passed away in our office during a workday. And in the area of TRAB, we had, you know, of course, we used to have, I think, Veronica Kwan many years ago. We had also Rainey Salas many years ago, and after they left, we had Jennifer Antilwan. Then we did also have technical research and appeals officer who was formerly in, I believe, CI, criminal investigation, but he ended up getting picked up there. And then we had a work, and actually just to share Senator Essay and Senator Perez, prior to us coming, there was the administrator, and we had someone who was on extended sick leave because he was very ill. He eventually passed away, I think, a little bit over a year ago. Maybe it'll be 2 years this coming December. But in that particular area, because it is very specialized, and frankly, tax is very specialized in general, that it was very hard because we had the administrator, and then we had, when we came on board, the administrator actually asked for a word processing secretary to help with administration because they didn't have one. And they, the technical research and appeals officer that they did have, he was super sickly. I think for the first year that I was at RevTax, I probably didn't meet him until June maybe, or September-ish, because he was off island for medical. So what we were able to do during the time that we've been there in 2019 is allocate a second technical research and appeals officer to that branch, get a word processing secretary. Unfortunately, the other appeals officer that we had passed away. And then, of course, we had some promotions within, so our research and appeals officer ended up being hired as the taxpayer service administrator / disclosure officer. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And can you please explain, because they wanted to mention the director's office has 60 folks. I was there and you don't have 60 individuals up there. I mean, I can count the number of people you have because I walked through your whole building. And I'm surprised you even said 12, because if you count the one receptionist as you enter, then you have your chief administrator, then you just go down the line. I was only looking at maybe 8 people, not even including you two. Because you also have a call center.
Right.
So that when anybody calls the Department of Revenue and Taxation, it's funneled through that.
Right.
And if anybody has a problem with that one, then gosh,
Right.
take a back seat. And you know, it just amazes me because, and I ask my colleagues, visit the Department of Revenue and Taxation, walk the halls, because you see, if I'm correct, you addressed, Ms. Lozama took me to the kiosk, I guess, and you showed how a lot of other things are being processed through there. And if you folks want to talk about driver's license, when I was there, all the chairs that everybody's sitting on is what I brought in from the LESO program. And thank God they're still there. And I'm just very curious as how anyone wants to say there's an issue there. There's been an issue there before this administration, because I was there. And when we want to talk about dual hats, I held a dual hat. I was a tax investigator with Ms. Alganier, but I was also assigned as the compliance supervisor. So I'm familiar with what goes on in the department. And it's just rough that I'm going to look at a report here that talks 2019. That's 4 years ago. I like to see something that would come out and say, this is 2023, you're behind 18 million. Really? I can't see that. I can say that on technical research and appeals board, gosh, I would turn to Ms. Elgin first and says, where are we at on some of this assessment? Where are we at on the criminal investigation? Where are we at on the examination for audit? And where's collection on going after and seizing property or putting liens? That's what I'd be asking. Maybe that 18 million should be in the collection branch so they can find out if they need to seize property or put liens on properties. Because on an assessment, we need to understand what goes on in revenue taxation. And to the people of Guam listening is that there are many things that go on, and that revenue and tax is another form of an IRS, but they can't cover everything. An IRS is a lot bigger, and revenue and tax is just a small part. But every part, if people would just actually look up IRS, you can almost see almost everything that you guys do, in addition to driver's license, which I've received calls about driver's license, and I've talked to them. And I told them, this is the phone number, call and make an appointment. Yeah, but the line's so long. I said, call and make an appointment. Because I've been up there when the line was long. And I talked to several of the constituents. I said, what is your concern? You know, I've been here for an hour. Yeah, but when did you get here? Actually, I just really got here about an hour ago. So what's the issue? And you know, if they call, make an appointment, it works. I know that. If they want to talk about registration, it's online. And I know you guys are working on the online for driver's license. And move along, folks. The time today is technology. And on the GRT, I know there's been many strides to fix GRT. And that's a monster of its own. That I know for a fact. It's no different when we're trying to go after the Tobacco Stamp Tax Act. And I'd be curious to know, are we going any further than we've been trying to go for the past 5-6 years? And maybe Mrs. Zama can answer, because not you, the director, because I know you already recused yourself from that, but maybe Mrs. Zama can ask about that. Are we anywhere on the tobacco stamp?
So if I'm not mistaken, I believe the deadline
Sorry,
has
we can hold off
passed.
till
I'm
the
sorry.
next,
okay.
that's later on in the.
Okay,
Okay.
that's later
okay,
on.
Senator.
Okay.
Okay, but in general, technical research, I understand what's going on there. I just have the edge maybe over everybody else because I work there. And when we talk about the 60 folks you got, I can vouch you don't have 60. I will vouch that you probably have 8. And 4 of them is in the call center. So I know what's going on up there. People just visit and be surprised how they're in a matchbox at the Department of Taxation. That's why I've been pursuing, trying to find land and move you guys out of there and appropriate your rent money to pay for a lease-to-own building. And then maybe we can settle the issue of the long lines. They'll be inside the building sitting on comfortable chairs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator. So I just want to go back to the administrator position. So there was a vacancy in 2022 upon the retirement of the administrator, is that correct?
The TRAB administrator?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, and then it wasn't filled until this year?
yes.
What month?
I believe April. I believe April.
Okay. So we do have the GG1s concerning this, and
Sure.
this individual was hired by temporary appointment
Yes,
under Rule 4.603B, which is a temporary
which is,
detail,
yes.
and not to exceed 120 working days. So that would put it July. Has there been any, and as of the information that we received, 8 days later, she was then made deputy tax commissioner. Was there any, we don't have records as far as detailing of that is concerned.
Okay.
And currently, 120 days is up. Has there been any updated
Thank you.
personnel actions regarding this position?
Absolutely. So with regards to, so there are different types of, in the government, there are different types of classification of employees. And the law and the Budget Act, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and thank you, Senator Perez, because actually you were part of that, where what had happened was there was actually clarification, I believe, in the Budget Act with regards to the language regarding the rehire of employees. And so we did have, and we do have some retirees who, I don't know how long they've been there, but they've been there well longer than I have been, that have been working in our agency and have been hugely important to and critical to our mission and to getting things done. But with regards to the new employees, what has been happening, the ones that we've had to bring back again, because of course there is a gap in information and we do need their technical expertise. What happens is we do have to renew them, and of course there is a process for that. And so, and that occurs with all of our temporary employees, if we have any.
Okay, so what is the legal authority for her employment now, because 120 days is up?
It would be if there is a renewal, just like with any LTA, if there is there should be documentation regarding that.
So we don't have documentation. Where is the documentation for this?
If you want a GG1 or some other document, then we can provide that, but I wasn't aware that you needed that.
So Director Byrne, do you have documentation of why this employee is still employed and when there's no documentation concerning her exceeding the temporary assignment?
Senator, I'm not aware of this particular case, but we will take a look and make sure that the documentation is as it should be.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on. If we can put up the slides again. We're going to skip to the next slide. Okay. So this one basically is the Tax Enforcement Division. Consists of Criminal Investigation Branch, Tax Examination Branch, and Collection Branch. And so what this slide shows is the staffing patterns from 2009 all the way to current day. And so it shows definitely changes, some changes more than others. Particularly concerning is the downward trends. And so we're seeing downward trends in the collection branch and the tax examination branch. Criminal investigation looks pretty even. So if you look throughout the years, average of 6 employees. Tax examination branch, its peak was around in 2011. They had 29 employees. And now they are down to, according to this, 10. So we're seeing a reduction more than half. So that's basically, if we're talking about 29, it's a third of the workforce. Collection branch, we have the peak at, let's see, it says 29 in about 2013. So 2011, 2013, about 29. And then it's reduced down to 20. And so the concern about staffing levels, again, is the service to, and the service and the quality of service that they're providing. And considering so let's start with the collection branch, right? So collection branch ensures all outstanding business privilege taxes, federal income tax, withholding tax liabilities are collected in a fair and expeditious manner. They are also empowered to offer short-term installment agreements where appropriate and and where appropriate, serve tax liens, levies, and warrants to execute prompt collection. They work diligently to ensure full compliance with the Guam territorial income tax laws, and they coordinate with other tax enforcement branches. And so the issue here, so as we can see, it has affected their output. In the next slide. You can turn to the next slide. So this slide shows employees as I guess the side-by-side comparison of employees and the number of cases that they've processed. So I'll read them. So if you look at the sections where the bar graphs are, 2013 number of caseload, 9,262 with 29 employees. So those were the peak years of employment. And the net following year count of caseload, 11,000, roughly 11,000 with 25 employees. And so we're seeing the workload increase over the years. The staffing is going down. So that is a concern.
Sure. So, and thank you. So regarding collection branch, and I can speak on the different branches separately if you like.
Can I just finish one more slide?
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Senator Perez. Sorry to interrupt you.
Next slide, please.
I thought you had a question, so please excuse me. Or that.
Yeah, the next slide shows the personnel versus collected. So this, the previous slide was personnel versus cases. This one is personnel with the collection amount. And so we're seeing a huge drop in collections, as the line graph shows. And then the next slide is a composite slide. So we have the case numbers and drop in collections. But we don't have the information for the most recent years. But we're seeing a drop in employees. So it is concerning about this trend that there is a drop in performance, but there's also a decrease in employees. And the staffing levels is at the minimum is very critical to improve that. So maybe the question, obviously it's not all due to staffing. Were there certain changes that took place that resulted in this reduced collection?
So I think there was a couple of things that you spoke to, which is drop in employees, and I wanted to address that. With regards to our agency, when we came in, I believe, my understanding is it had been many years since our team members were given the opportunity to be promoted in the agency. So, of course, the strategy to try to get promotion or get people to be promoted has been, and this is what we've been trying to do, is to open up our higher level, our 3-4 level, 4-3-2 levels, so we can allow for our employees to be moved up or promoted, and then having, and of course that takes time, and then having it be the entry level areas be the ones that are going to be open, meaning not departmental or not hired within the agency. So unfortunately, that process takes a while. It takes longer than if we were just to open it up to everybody, because again, we want to give our employees the first opportunity to be able to be promoted within the agency. And I think it's only fair, since they've been there and they've been working the work for many years, some of them even taking on senior roles or roles that are higher than them, or the position they're supposed to be in, because of a lack of, I guess, any other way of actually getting the work done. Also, I did want to point out that even with regards to the IRS, with regards to performance, the performance when it comes to collections, actually, and the IRS as well, is my understanding, you cannot base performance based on the dollar amount of collections. That is not a performance measure that is used. It cannot even be used for performance evaluation. And so I just wanted to point that out, because that's something even our previous deputy tax commissioner would tell me all the time. So and with regards to the collection, I'm sorry, because I wasn't sure the source. I know you have a lot of data, and great job putting together this presentation, Senator Perez, but I don't have this data. But with regards to my team, of course, if you recall, for the last few years, we've been going through a pandemic. And 2020, March 16, we closed that was Monday, we closed down the whole entire government, probably the whole entire island. And of course, what happened at that time is our shift focused to processing of returns, making sure we get out EIP 1, 2, 3, all rise, program and SLAPI. And sorry, program and SLAPI was DOA. It was Adzurin Mangafa. I apologize. That was a lot of programs. So, so our shift focused. And so, of course, during the time when we had the public health emergency and people did not have jobs, they did not have a means of paying. Also, it was an emergency, a worldwide emergency. You know, the issue of doing levies, liens, and warrants and actively collecting is going to reduce because, ma'am, we're not going to go after people who don't have jobs. So with regards to collections, of course, you would start seeing that the collection efforts would reduce. But I will tell you, in 2019, when we started, we actually ramped up our field visits. And a field visit is when a revenue officer goes out into the field and visits people who owe taxes. And the other thing that we have actually just did an announcement on, but we've been working on for several months, if not more, is the issuance of our annual collection notices. So what's going to happen beginning in the next weeks, you're going to see every single taxpayer who has an outstanding tax liability that's been assessed is going to actually get a reminder notice that they owe taxes. And that's going out again in this month of October. That's something I did mention in our budget hearing where we're trying to get it out in August, September. It didn't happen, but we're very close, and that's going to happen. So again, during the public health emergency, of course, that impacted our collections and our collection efforts because it would be probably inhumane for us to go after people if they don't have jobs. But in the aftermath of it, of course, we began to ramp up again. And just so you know, even though we didn't go actively after people, we were still collecting monies from people, still working to make sure that their taxpayers have rights, still working to make sure that we afford them their rights. But not only that, making sure we perfect the government's interest in taxes by filing the proper documents with the proper authorities.
Yes, thank you for that. And if you notice the data, a lot of the data preceded, believe your directorship. So it'd be interesting to see your assessment of what changed. This was pre-pandemic levels,
Okay,
right?
thank you.
Yeah, so what was the cause of this drop? And maybe this can inform the director, you as a director, to identify ways to improve that.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the Tax Enforcement Tax Examination Branch. Next slide, please. Okay, so just for the public, Tax Examination Branch examines tax returns to ensure compliance with the tax laws. It promotes an understanding of Guam tax laws to promote voluntary compliance, and it performs audits of selected tax returns. And so, next slide. So the reason why I'm focusing on this is to show that there is a critical shortage of staffing in these areas, which can have effects on the output of these divisions. And so in looking at the data here, 2009, so we have, this data shows a comparison between employees and the amount of cases. And so you see almost like a bell curve, it looks like, of cases, with the peak happening in 2017. And then if you look at the bottom line, the total number of employees, there was at that point 21 employees, and now it's been reduced in half, if not less, at this time. Look, next slide. The amounts collected, and so you see here those individuals. 20 employees, roughly 20 employees at the peak, collected over $20 million for the government, and now we're down, the amount has dropped significantly with the number of employees present. Next slide. And so this is a composite of both the counts, amounts collected, and employees. And so again, the point here is staffing is critical, and these staffing shortages have an effect on the output of Department of Revenue and Taxation, as well as assuring public confidence in that the laws are enforced properly. So this information was from citizen-centric reports, by the way, that have been provided by DRT to the public auditor. So at this point, you did mention earlier to the questions from one of my colleagues that you are in the process of hiring to increase,
So
to
with
fill
regard,
vacancies?
well, I want to kind of lay the foundation for this. We did actually provide the number of revenue agents and tax auditors for that particular branch. But to even go back further, back to 2014, so just to share with you, we actually have lost a couple of people, even to the Department of Administration. They were Revenue Agent 1s. Revenue Agent 1, if you're familiar with the Competitive Wage Act, there is an actual listing of positions. Revenue Agent 1 has a pay grade of J. I believe that my team, when they moved over to the Department of Administration, went over to Accountant 1, which is K. That is one pay grade higher. And just to share with you, prior to this 2014 Competitive Wage Act, they were both Ks. For some reason after that, my understanding is our revenue agents they moved from a J to a K. I'm sorry, a K to a J. JK, yeah, sorry, my alphabet going the other way. So from a K, which is higher, to a J. So, and we're very grateful for the increase that happened with regards to the 22% increases for our employees. They definitely deserve it. But basically, if we're talking about just Accountant 1 and Revenue Agent 1, and again, Revenue Agent 1 being here, if you look at an Accountant 1 being here, and I believe that in the 22%, if we think about the adjusted pay scale, not the original pay scale without 22%, I believe that's about a $7,000 increase annually. And again, I believe both positions require an accounting degree. Again, in our agency, as you mentioned, Senator Perez, you're absolutely right, we're very short, but some of it has to do with perhaps pay and to illustrate a $7,000 difference, but the person qualifies for both positions. And so I believe we lost 2 people in that area to the Department of Administration. We've lost some to the private sector, probably other agencies as well. We currently have 7, I'm sorry, I mentioned 7 earlier, 7 positions that, and I did confirm the count with the Department of Administration, 7 for the examination branch, but of course we would like more, and that is what we're working on again. But of course we did lose and we lost our exam supervisor who was with us for many years. We lost her to the public auditor's office just a few months ago. So, again, it is challenging, and I don't believe that the issue of recruitment is unique to us at our agency, and especially, again, in an area where, it's accounting focused. Also, I was talking with some people in accounting, and my understanding is even the CPA firms themselves are having a hard time, to the point that where they're getting their accounting people is from the Philippines, because, of course, they have partner offices in the Philippines. And these positions, ma'am, require an accounting degree. So we cannot have people who don't have an actual specifically accounting degree. So, there are challenges with recruitment. I am confident that we're going to be able to bring people. I actually, our team has been talking about different ways about trying to bring on people, perhaps through some people who may have retired already and may be willing to come back. That's one area. Also, even in the accounting community, talking with them. We were recently at the Association of Government Accountants meeting. But yeah, we do recognize that it is an issue, Senator Perez. Perhaps not everybody in our agency is aware that we do have 7 GG1s that have already been sent to DOA. But again, that's not the only hiring we're going to do in this area.
Okay, so there is a recruitment now for tax examination personnel?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And going back to what you mentioned, how they got reverted down or downgraded from a K to a J, can that be rectified at this time?
I am not sure the process.
Yes, it can. If the agency submits an up-to-date job description, we will reevaluate it. Many of these job descriptions, Senator, are old, if not ancient, so I would certainly encourage Director Shimizu to submit those as quickly as possible.
Okay, so again, follow up to reassess. So that they
Absolutely,
could be-
Senator Perez.
So they can get a proper pay scale.
Appreciate that. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so I want to move on to the next section, which is, so if we can have the slides back up. So next slide, please. So the divisions I'm really focusing on are the ones where we're seeing a decrease in staffing, but keep in mind that there has been increases in workload. So even though staffing at other divisions have remained stagnant, it doesn't, just basically I want to point out that it's probably also important to increase their staffing levels to keep up with the workload if automation is not, if you're unable to leverage automation for those areas. So again, like my colleague said earlier, there was a concern about the business privilege tax branch. Again, they provide taxpayer assistance for business privilege tax, use tax, hotel occupancy taxes, and other local taxes. They receive, collect, process all returns, forms, documents associated to these taxes, and they are charged to maintain records and submit necessary reports. And so again, my office has been receiving also concerns about the service that is provided by this branch. Next slide, please. And so again, this slide shows the overall in the Taxpayer Services Division, the staffing capacity, and broken down by the different parts of that division. So we have income tax assistance, which is the highest, and then which is the in red. Right next to that is the electronic data processing, and then further is business privilege tax. The next one over is accounting branch. The next one is central files, and then the totals. And so if you look at that, there is a decrease, a downward trend in the business privilege tax division. And so the concern here is that we're seeing, obviously, there's some concerns by constituents of, service. And again, there's a correlation here with the staff. And what are you doing to address this as far as staffing goes?
Thank you, Senator. And actually, in this particular branch in May, on the Monday right after the typhoon, one of our employees passed away abruptly, unexpectedly. And that person actually who passed away, he was the one who would be on the outside of the counter, and he would assist on a regular basis those customers that had challenges with filing their BPT, because we are required by law to have kiosks outside, or kiosks in our agency for people to file their BPT. So unfortunately, we did lose someone because he passed away just in May. Also, we have had challenges, as Deputy Director Lizama mentioned. That particular branch is the branch that takes care of use tax, bonded, warehouse, and of course, we're grateful because I believe it was in the 35th Guam legislature, of which you are part of, where BPT filing online was required. And so what's huge about that is if there's about 15,000 GRT filers, that equates to about 180,000 BPT returns each year that now, we're not having to actually process. But what we're trying to do, and of course, as Deputy Director Lizama mentioned earlier, we were actually able to hire two people as classified people. They were LTAs within our agency, and they were able to go through the competitive process and be hired, of course, with the work of DOHR as actual, people in the branch that are classified. And we recognize that there is a need in BPT. We have actually had to allocate an acting supervisor and have had to have acting supervisors many times, as Deputy Director mentioned. One of the people who we thought was going to actually apply and I think did apply for the position. And the only person actually that it was within our agency that was interested in the position for the supervisor, she ended up retiring, and then we ended up again, we're in acting position. But we definitely agree that there is work to be done. We need to hire. We need to figure out if we're not able to hire for BPT supervisor, why, and if there's a possibility, and maybe we can work with the Department of Administration HR to address maybe if it can be a kind of a mid role, maybe not a supervisor, but like a mid between supervisor and administrator, because we do have other people who in other areas who perhaps can take on an additional responsibilities and are very familiar with like the income tax side. Because my thought is if we can simulate what the income tax division, which is very, very efficient and has a great process in place for scanning of returns, et cetera, and filing, if we can simulate that in BPT, it will be huge. So those are the things that we need to look at, but of course, some of it will require for us to work with the Department of Administration and their expertise.
So currently, is there a supervisor?
There is an acting supervisor, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the concerns, too, that I have with many of these divisions is they have vacancies in the heads, and that's really critical to, ensure like the response to any issues in the day-to-day operations, as well as make recommendations to the management as far as, how do we address the workload? Because obviously, even though, again, the employment is stagnant or status quo for some of the divisions, the workload has increased, and so that's a huge concern. Okay, next slide, please. So real property tax. Again, this is another area that we're seeing a downward trend in employment. The real properties administers and enforces all real property tax laws. There's two branches. The appraisal branch was considered the compliance arm of the division, and the assessment branch, which is the taxpayer service and collection arm of the division. And so we're seeing a decrease. So next slide, please. So we're seeing there's a decrease in those employment, basically a decrease as far as employment is concerned. And also, I guess the other thing is appraisal. When was the last time real property was appraised? I believe, are we supposed to be doing that every
5 years?
Okay, when was the last time?
So the last time it was done was in 2013, and I think it went into effect for the 2014 roll. And we are actually right now in the process of working on an RFP for the revaluation. And our team is working on the specs for that so we can issue that. How it works, though, is that generally, as per our team, an actual very good valuation is going to take some time. It could be anywhere from 18 to 24 months to complete. And of course, but again, that's something that we're working on actively right now on an RFP.
Okay. We'll move on to the next slide. All right, so we have regulatory division. This just shows the staffing patterns. It's pretty station leveled out for the most part. I think motor vehicles, the one that, it's pretty steady. So a lot of these are leveled out. Again, though, the workload may have increased, so staffing may not be adequate. Do you have any comments regards to staffing levels on this?
With regards to the motor vehicle division?
Sorry, regulatory division.
Oh, regulatory division. So with regards to regulatory in compliance, we actually hired one compliance inspector, I believe. And of course, we do have a plan. I might have mentioned this in the budget hearing, I don't recall, but basically what we've asked our administrators, and again, there are 6 administrators, we've asked them, what are your priorities with regards to hiring? Because really it's the administrators who know their areas best. So based on the priority lists that was given to me from our administrators, what we've done is work to hire in those areas. In the insurance and banking area, we recently hired someone who actually has an actuarial background, and that's exciting because I know that was important to you, Senator Perez. But again, in compliance, we did actually hire a and a compliance inspector 1. And of course, we do need to work on ramping up that area because not only do they take care of alcohol and beverage, they also take care now of cannabis, and they also help in the regulatory function for business license. And as you know, we have been conducting various operations, of course, to make sure that people are complying with the law.
Okay, thank you. And then next slide, please. Motor vehicle division, of course, we're seeing a downward trend in staffing. Okay, motor vehicle consists of the driver's license examination branch, vehicle registration, motor carrier safety assistance program, responsible for enforcing Guam's vehicle codes and to ensure all vehicles meet standard safety requirements. They're charged with assessing vehicle transfer taxes, registration, licensing fees. Next slide. And so this just shows again, the staffing levels. We're seeing definitely a decrease in some of these areas. Driver's license, vehicle registration seems to be pretty steady, but the driver's license examination has gone down considerably. Motor carrier is downward from a decade ago, but so it's also seen decreases. So again, I guess the question here is, does the management have plans to open up recruitment for these areas that
Yes.
are seeing staffing shortages?
Yes, and in fact, we actually hired, last year we did hire a driver's license examiner. This year we have, if not two, at least one new driver's license examiner. And again, as I mentioned, in terms of the executive direction area, likely there's quite a few people that is shown under an executive direction that is actually probably, again, in this area, which is driver's license. Because there is definitely more than seven people there, right? There's probably twice as much in that branch as is showing here.
Okay, so we'll be expecting an open recruitment on the DOA side for these divisions?
Right, and I do have actually right now in driver's license, in motor vehicle division, which is driver's license, vehicle registration, motor carrier safety, we have 2 driver's license examiner 2 positions, and in vehicle registration branch, we have a vehicle registration officer 3, a vehicle registration officer 2, and a customer service representative.
Okay, thank you. I'll give my colleagues an opportunity to ask questions at this point from the different divisions. Senator Burnett.
Ma'am, I'm just taking all this information in at this time, so that I'd wait till the next round.
Okay, thanks. Senator Kanata, if you have any questions at this point?
I just want to clarify, are we only talking about drivers now? I mean, the driver's license area, or are we?
Yeah, basically everything we've covered so far. So I am going to go more into detail if you saw the PowerPoints.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is not directed to DRT, but directed to DOA. What is the status with the recruitments that are pending for DRT? I guess both of you can answer. I'm just trying to figure out where's the hiccup here, because we certainly need the recruits to be impaneled already to assist the branch, right? So if we still have people pending over at the DOA, we want to figure out what really needs to be mediated to get this moving forward.
Senator, if I could be permitted to make a general comment about recruitment. We've started monitoring those lists that we have to submit back to agencies for interview. Most of those lists are short. We're not getting, we have a number of open positions. Probably, I think it's in excess of 200 throughout the line agencies. And for almost every position for which we submit a list to the agency, we have less than 5 people on there. That means that if the agency doesn't select from the list of applicants we have to go back. And if it's an open position, we hopefully have some more people on the list. If it's a closed position, then we have to open it up again. So the issue really is the number of open lists that consist mainly of non-selected candidates, and they're non-selected for a number of reasons. So I would have to, with respect to these particular open lists, I would have to provide that information to you because I don't have it available to me now. But I will also be happy to provide the statistics we have on these insufficient lists that we're constantly monitoring.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, in reference to, yeah, if you can provide that to the chair and then we can follow up on that, I'd really appreciate it. What is the, well, I guess we're not at, or, well, we were at collection, but I don't know this is the, what is the collection status for sin taxes? I guess that would go to Ms. Lazama, right? Because the conflict of interest.
Okay, I know our team is working on that. We had some issues. I do believe that the Department of Administration had raised the question for the reason or concerning the decrease in the Healthy Futures Fund. And so our team has been working on that. We believe that there is a kind of like a gap in the transmission of data. So we will provide that information later. And we will certainly update or provide that update to Director Byrne.
Thank you for that information. Certainly, that's a little pet project of mine, although it's not my oversight DRT. I just really want to make sure that we're collecting all the money from the cigarette and tobacco tax. Obviously, I tried to champion legislation for sugar tax, but I also don't want to implement a tax that we kind of capture the carton of cigarette versus an ounce of sugar, right? Because I don't want to tax King Car versus a Camel Silver. So what is the status of DOD contracts? Are we, you know, because I had an oversight hearing in conjunction of both of those tax collections. I'm not saying that you guys are not doing your job. I'm just trying to, you know, make sure that we're tracking these things, right? I really want to thank all the DRT employees out there that are still carrying and towing the line, you know, regardless of the shortfalls of the recruitment. It's very valid that you guys have been able to deliver tax returns out expeditiously. We're not borrowing from anywhere. We're paying it out, and we're not raiding a federal fund to pay the local fund issues, right? So it's very good, and I commend you guys for those efforts. And it's showing that you guys are getting it out within the month, right? So that's great. Not before you have to wait until you get your WAR claims. So yeah, where are we with the DOD contract collections?
So with regards to the federal contractor project, and I did mention this in our budget hearing, I believe, you know, and Senator Perez did bring up the issue with drop-in examination branch. Examination branch was the branch that was working on our federal contractor program or project, and we had two phases to that. Phase one, which was something that was already done, I believe, in early this year. Phase two, we were supposed to go into, but again, because of the decrease in the number of staffing that we have, we're having to take a little bit of a different approach, and that's something, again, that we need to evaluate. But Senator Kanata, we're always working on collecting. I mean, that is a day-to-day. We have people who collect every day. We have people who are, you know, working to examine things every day. That's part of our job. With regards to the federal contractor project we had specifically, again, we finished what was called phase one. The public auditor was well aware of that. And also, as we work to try to get to phase two, the problem we run into is having our team work on special projects versus working on just the regular day-to-day. And so that's something that we, again, are going to work to have to take a different approach to, and hopefully, if we're able to get more people in our agency, again, be able to do in the way that we initially had said we were. But we're constantly working on it. We're working to address some of the public auditor's recommendations as well. And, you know, we're going to continue to work on that effort to make sure we collect on taxes.
Okay, we are considering, I'm not the one considering the legislation, but I'm definitely in support of vaping tax, right? So that's going to be a new issue for you guys, right? Is it's most likely going to be an implemented tax. I'm pretty sure our body's most likely going to vote for it. But the vape tax, what is your approach on that? Do you think it should be treated like tobacco?
So right now, here's the challenge. But first, I should say that I believe both Senator Sten Augustine and Senator Tydegui are trying to co-author a bill on vaping. Currently, how it goes is anyone who brings in vaping products, you have to have a license, right? A tobacco license. However, when it is reported on the BPT form, it is not sectioned out. So, the senator has been made aware of that challenge, and I believe that Senator San Augustine, that is, and so I believe that his staff has already created some sort of draft, and which, when they are ready to, they will approach us and try to kind of finalize, if you will, or perhaps discuss what may pose potential challenges with regard to actual implementation or carrying out that particular piece of legislation, should it become law, right? So that's where we are with regard to vaping. There are different jurisdictions. It's kind of complex for some jurisdictions in that they tax it at a percentage of volume. And I believe the senator's approach is to try to do a simplified tax and just make it on all products and at a flat rate. I don't have the actual details, but that has been part of the discussion. And Senator Perez, is it okay for me to just kind of give an update on the tobacco stamp? Are we there, or do we?
Sure, we can go ahead and continue.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so, we did put out, we had another IFB, or we had one issued, and I believe there was an inquiry. There were 2 questions that were posed back to us, which we answered, and GSA in turn provided to the potential, or to the bidder, potential bidder. And if I'm not mistaken, it recently closed. So we have sent a request out to GSA to find out if there were any successful bids on the IFB. So we will keep you apprised. Okay?
Thank you for that information. You kind of went advance notice, because that was my next follow-up question. Back to DOA. I know this is not your oversight hearing, but it seems like we got a lot of openings over at DRT. But based on my Control F mechanism on your available employment opportunities on your website, there's only like 6 positions listed on your website for openings at DRT. So is the employment opportunity listed at DRT's website or DOA's website? Because my understanding is it's on your website.
That's correct, Senator.
Yeah, so I only see 6. There's 1 income tax service specialist, 2, or II, right? And then there's business tax service supervisor, a vehicle registration officer, 3, III. And these are all from 2020, 21, 2022. And then there's the most recent one that I see is a regulatory examiner supervisor. I think that's just a department, but yeah, it's just saying 29, 29, 23. So there's only like 6 openings. So if there's that many vacancies, why aren't they listed here?
Well, I think the list that you just read out conforms pretty well with the list that the director was talking about of open positions. We at DOA react to GT1s that come through from the agency through BBMR to us. If there's a authorized GT1, we will advertise an open position. So that list must be reflective of the GT1s that we currently hold.
And if I might add, again, to kind of augment what Director Burns is saying, they could just be in different phases of the hiring. So it could be that maybe it's been published, it stopped being published because the DOA HR team, because it closed, the position closed, and they're reviewing the the applicants and rating them. And so you may not see them. But what we do have, again, to Director Burns' point, is the list of GG1s, but this may not exactly relate to what you see on the website, because it could be in a different phase of hiring.
Well, back to DOA, I'm just saying that because you have openings for it's not really relevant to DRT, but there's a police officer trainee that has openings since 2019, and you have another opening, that, again, from 2019. So where are those openings that are not listed? That's what I'm just trying to find.
Senator, those lists are the open, continuous lists where we're always inviting for applications, rather than the ones that are open for a period and then close, which is what the director was just talking about.
Okay, thank you. One more, sorry. This temporary license plate. It seems to me, like I said, I had an accident, right? And then there was a temporary license plate. The temporary license plate, you cannot read it because it's so pixelated when you're on a security camera, right? So my question to you guys is, when these individuals, quote unquote, get pulled over with a temporary license plate, the license plate is so small versus a standardized dealer license plate. Why don't we have dealer license plates like before? I've bought a lot of new cars. So I'm just saying, why don't you guys have DL994 or DL, you know, like XXX? So we've, I guess, shifted to this paper license plate, but I just find it difficult for myself to have insurance claim because it's a temporary license plate. We don't know who owns it. It's just a white car hit my truck. But it's minor for me, but I'm just saying that in the event there's a hit and run, you can't even track the person because the license plate's pixelated.
Yes, and thank you so much, Senator Kanata, for that. I actually, after, I think it was our budget hearing maybe, when you mentioned that, I did actually go back to my supervisor in vehicle registration and talk with him about it because, you know, you are right, it's very tiny. If, you know, somebody's trying to figure out who owns a vehicle, you know, it's going to be difficult just based on that. So what I've asked him is what we can do, and, you know, I think that the idea perhaps maybe of just maybe ordering more dealer license plates may be a good option, but again, that's something I did talk with our vehicle registration supervisor on, and I will just have to follow up with him on where we are with that.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a great idea. If you guys can order license plates, if it's even easier, like if they buy it from Cars Plus, put CP instead of Chalampaguas, Cars Plus 2021 or whatnot. Or if it's GMC vehicle, GMC 0001. I don't know. I'm just, you know, we got to figure out a way to be more, you know, make these things more visible for people who have, you know, security cameras or whatnot. When we get into an accident, who are we going to claim to? Black car hit me and split, right? So, yeah, I just think that that's something that needs to be addressed. Other than that, there's no further questions for me on my end, and I'll excuse myself. But thank you guys for all your hard work. Keep up the good work and let me know if my office can support it in any way, okay?
Thank you, Senator. So just to kind of point out that, you know, looking at the budget, we were told that if a position is not filled within 3 years, then it becomes unfunded. And so there's several positions that are unfunded within the division. So that tells me that there's the recruitment problems. It indicates the recruitment problems. But the question too, I think I want to follow up with Senator Kanata, is that you know, I would like to follow up and see if positions were actually being opened for all of these positions. So in addition to not filling the positions, was there an opening for recruitment?
I believe if you look at our budget, it will indicate if there is, but, you know, so with regards to our budget, of course, there's finite resources. We can only have a certain number of employees maximum based on the dollar amount that we have. But Senator Perez, we actually are really doing our best to recruit, I will share. And it isn't easy. And it is actually at no fault of anybody. We recognize, just like we're short, the Department of Administration HR branch is short. And so, you know, as I mentioned, actually I didn't mention this, but what's been really great is, especially over the last few months, we've really been seeing quite a few more, and they call it certification packets, but it's basically the list of individuals that we're able to call for an interview and who have been vetted already by the Department of Administration. But we've actually been opening up positions. Right now we have 34 that we have, and we're going to be working to open up more, you know, of course, within our budget.
All right, thank you. Senator Burnett, did you want to ask questions about? Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the vaping. I know that Senator San Augustine has indicated that he's working on a measure, but can you explain, like, just walk me through, let's say I want to open a vape shop. What's the process? What type of licensing do I need? And then what do I pay right now?
Okay, well, I am just aware of the fact that, once you have a business license, you also need a tobacco license, even though it doesn't fall under the definition of tobacco. So those two licenses, and by the way, the tobacco license, that goes before, when the board meets, that goes before, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting that mixed up with alcohol. But, so what happens is you get that license, and then...
How much is that license?
Gosh, I couldn't tell you. I
Okay.
apologize. Yeah.
Just later. Yeah.
$100 is what the compliance
Okay.
supervisor is telling
Okay.
me.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, it obviously is untapped, potential revenue. Just because the trend has been, and nationally, the trend has been for people to go to vaping just because of costs. Also too, some people don't want to smell like, I don't know, tobacco. And so there's some different factors, but obviously it is untapped potential for revenue.
Would you estimate that the decline in the Healthy Futures Fund is related to people migrating off, are we calling it traditional tobacco, and moving towards vaping?
Possibly. I don't know, because right now on the BPT form, right, it's not sectioned out. So it could be. It could be a reason for that. Okay.
Director Shimizu, so it was very encouraging to see a lot of the steps that you're taking to hire different personnel across the department. But I would just ask about the continuity, because, speaking plainly, we're in receipt of information that you might be intending to leave the department soon. Can you confirm that? Is that accurate?
And so, of course, I have talked with my team, and, there is an opportunity for me to leave. I have not resigned yet. I have not submitted my resignation. And in fact, I love my team very much. And, but yes, I am planning to leave, but I have advised the governor. I've also advised the lieutenant governor and also my team that I will do my best to transition. Again, I don't even have a date, by the way, so I couldn't even tell you. At this point, I don't have a date, so I'm still the director and I'm still going to be working. And I do have to say, though, that even in my prior positions that I've left, even after I've left, if there is a need for people to contact me, if there is a way that I can help, I will always do my best to help.
Can I just ask, because I've been talking to some of the staff, they call the office, but as far as the vacancies and departures from the department, how would you characterize maybe some of the reasons people are leaving DRT?
So we do have people in real property. We had people leave because of retirement. We've had our higher level people also leave because of retirement. We've had people leave because they have better opportunities, like I mentioned, Department of Administration. One person left. I believe she decided she wanted to be an esthetician or something like that. So, people leave for different reasons. They may leave even for we had a couple of people leave as well, or at least one person leave this year because of they had a job at the federal government. And so, of course, the federal government pays well. I think a lot of it really has to do with the pay. And of course, yes, there was a 22% increase, but, and I guess, it's great. I need to work on, and Senator Perez did bring up the mechanism for adjusting within our agency if there is a need to adjust the pay scale for those positions. And that's something we're going to need to actively do. But again, Senator Barnett, as I mentioned, my two people who left RevTax for DOA, when they left us, they were at a J. They're qualified for both positions, so they're at a K. And that is a $6,000 to $7,000 annual difference off the bat. And so there is still some disparity even within the government. And of course, we're all short, so we are all hopeful for people. But we're also taking from each other because, again, of a lack of resources, human resources. And that's something that is not, I think, unique to Guam. It's actually all over the world.
Would you, or how would you respond to allegations from staff that they don't have a supportive working environment at DRT? Do you have morale issues at the department?
I think that every agency has morale issues to some extent. What I would say is that both Deputy Director and I have advised that we have an open door policy, but open door policy doesn't mean it's possible for us to meet with you all the time. It may mean that we just have to work to schedule some time. I am confident that there are, especially in some areas where we've lost a lot of people, they're very overly worked, that there is going to be morale issues. Those are things that are, in any organization, those are things that are very dynamic. You may work on something, just like with your kids. You might have, more than one child. You focus on one child, and then the other child may feel a little bit neglected, so you need to focus on that. So part of what we're, of course, having to work on doing is, and it's difficult because we are short-staffed, is allocating our own personal resources to try to work to address some of the morale issues that we may have. Not everybody's going to agree with decisions that I make. Part of being a leader means that sometimes we make decisions that people may not agree with. But I believe that for the most part, I believe that we have good people who seem to be happy with their jobs. We have people who, they work hard and they actually are committed to, being there and who have been there. We have one person here with us today. I think she's been with us 34 years. So, are there morale issues? Absolutely, just like anywhere else. No place is perfect. I'm not perfect by far. But I like to think that, we do our best, and we do our best to make ourselves available and to at least talk through with people. It may sometimes come out with good resolution where we both agree. It may come out where we don't agree. But ultimately, our job is to, again, do our best to lead and manage and make the best decisions that we can. And that may not always fit in somebody's, desire for themselves. So, sometimes maybe morale may be, a function of that. But I do care. I mean, I care very much for the team. And if somebody's unhappy, it would be great if we're able to sit down and talk to discuss it so we could figure out how to move forward.
Thank you for that, Director. Much is made of the increase in online filing, whether it's with BBT or just, you've really increased that option. Has that led to a decrease in overtime costs, or how has it affected, because you said the staff is overworked, right? And these online mechanisms are meant to alleviate the workload of the staff. So are we seeing that translated?
So as we kind of went through COVID, some of the issues that we ran into were, of course, that we were very backlogged with our income tax filings, our BBT filings. So we had to work, especially because income tax was tied to a lot of the federal programs. We had to work to try to get those up to speed as much as possible so we could pay people out. Frankly, there was a point, because I think after like 2 years of overtime straight, there was a point where we just had to stop doing overtime because people were very tired and they were getting burnt out. And so, we had to just say it's enough. But right now what we're working on is, so now that we're caught up, or at least as caught up as possible with regards to income taxes, the refund returns, now we're trying to make sure, and the Inspector General report did point out, there were other forms that we were backlogged in. And so we're working to get those done. And the great thing about, and I know we're not talking about the Inspector General report, but so how it works is there's a taxpayer service piece, which is basically the processing of income tax returns, GRT returns, 1099s, W-2s, right? All of those tax stuff or forms. So there's the processing of that. Then there's the regulatory function, the enforcement arm, which relies heavily on whether or not income tax has processed a return. If tax enforcement doesn't have good information because it's not up to date, tax enforcement is going to have a hard time to be able to enforce because they don't have up-to-date data within which to evaluate a person's tax situation. So, what's really been great is that now, yes, we have reduced overtime because, again, there's really a need to, both budgetary and also because really we can only have people work so much before it's just really not going to be as effective as possible. And people need their lives. They need their families. They need their time, they need that quality time. But so we have reduced overtime. We don't do as much overtime, but when we do overtime, again, we're working to try to get caught up with other things, which is going to be able to help us as we work to try to do more tax enforcement efforts.
You know, the pace with which the department is able to release the tax refunds, right? I mean, we've come a long way, but how important is it to shore up any shortcomings in the enforcement branches to be able to feed that pace where we're coming out with the tax refunds? I mean, in some cases it's quicker than the states, you know, which I think is great, but do we have, are we shoring up any shortcomings in those divisions? Because that's key, right, to being able to keep that pace?
Sure. So of course, what we have done with regards to income tax processing is we've had to allocate some resources from other areas to that area so that we can focus to make sure that we get the refunds out on time. I think we're at 19 days right now. So I believe that we released this week, September 10. And of course, thank you to the Department of Administration. We work very closely together to make sure that there's cash so that way we can pay out those refunds. And now an idea that I had proposed to some of my administrators is it possible now to try to allocate or shift some resources so we have some of our taxpayer service group maybe assist with some tax enforcement at some level. But tax enforcement is very specialized, right? So the reality is it's going to be very difficult to have a person who deals with just income tax to work on an actual enforcement effort. But again, that's something that we're looking at, we've been discussing. But again, it's really going to take kind of sitting down with my team, making sure that we understand what they believe is possible, and making sure that their areas don't have a problem, don't end up having an issue. Because that's also something that, again, in terms of addressing the issue of BPT, because we have a really great we have really great people, but our really great income tax supervisor, who just happens to be here with us, that perhaps some of what can happen is maybe her expertise, the things that we have learned in income tax, how to make sure that things are scanned and they're filed. And you see our boxes. I know in the Inspector General report there's this crazy picture of what our files look like. They do not look like that anymore. They're very organized. We have a great EDP supervisor who has made sure that but BPT has been severely lacking. And so perhaps again, what we need to do is figure out how that particular group, the group that now is getting pretty caught up since we're working to try to get hiring, but it's just taking a little time, how we could shift resources to the areas that need it. And that's a discussion that we've been having.
I saw in the media over the last couple of days articles about bed and breakfasts and those types of things, and so you had sent people out to kind of get a collar on this situation. Do you have anything to report back?
So what we did do, and so this is our second major operation of the year. The first operation that we did do, and this is from our compliance branch, and all of our branches, frankly, have great people in them, hardworking people. So this is the second major regulatory operation of the year that we did. What they did was, of course, they went and, just like you can get on Airbnb, you can get on any website to see what listings there are. We did make sure that we looked at listings. We wanted to make sure that people are properly licensed, utilizing those advertisements and perhaps other data. We were able to go out, identify places, and make sure that the places that we had visited, that we had found online, were actually licensed. And from that particular effort, we were able to find that there were 13 unlicensed, no license at all, and then there was, I believe, 35 not properly licensed. And not properly licensed meaning they may have had a rental license, but they did not have a short-term vacation rental or an actual bed and breakfast, which has very different requirements than a just regular house rental. And again, that's just one of the efforts that we've been doing as part of our regulatory function. And what we've been talking about for many years, honestly, is having different types of regulatory activity throughout the year. So we're constantly looking at the different types of industry and addressing the shortfalls or what may be happening in those industries if people are not properly licensed.
Let's take that scenario, and do you think it's possible to apply it to the vape scenario, in your estimation, are we missing anything on this vape issue that Reventax feels it has the jurisdiction or the authority to regulate?
So the thing about vape is currently the only tax that really has to be, well, first of all, if you bring it in wholesale, there's no wholesale tax. If you sell it retail, then you pay BPT. And that's what's involved. If there is a desire by the body and it does pass to do a vape tax, and so then it will happen. But really, that is really what is involved with that. I think some things that we had tried to address was the manufacturing of vape. So for example, sometimes there were vape shops that were, I think, taking or mixing things to create a product, which is not allowed. And so that was something I think early on that was brought to our attention. But again, vape is something that's new. Personally, my son is 24, but when he was kind of teenager and still in high school, I just always thought, his friends really smell really great. I didn't realize that, my son smelling like sweat and them smelling sweet like cherries had to do with the fact that they were smoking vape. I did not know. So vape is very new. I don't personally smoke, so I don't know. I've not been.
Were they smelling like strawberry cotton candy or something?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Just lastly, Daph, because we did have a resignation in the hearing yesterday, and I'm not trying to push you on this, but just if you could provide more information about your, would you say your departure's impending? Is there a timeline, and are you able to share any information about what your future plans are?
Sure. And the Guam Airport Board is, their board meeting is public. And at their last board meeting, they did actually approve to hire me as the comptroller. And that is, but there is no definite date. And that is subject to, of course, discussions with the management and, of course, with my bosses. And really, of course, working to make sure that, as you know, our agency is a very important one. It's a large one, have a lot of people, a lot of responsibilities, and so the way that I believe that the board had phrased it is up to January 15, 2024 is the possibility of me, I guess, taking on that role. But right now, I'm here. My focus is here. My focus is my agency. My focus is making sure that we're good, and that's my responsibility, and I take it very seriously.
Thank you, Daphne, and good luck. Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further.
All right, thank you, Senator. So we can go to the slides. So again, the purpose of this oversight was to really highlight some of the issues that are foundational to the agency. And so this in regards to recruitment and filling vacancies. So a lot of my colleagues asked questions regarding recurrent vacancies and what was done to fill them competitively. The one thing that I would like to add to this is, of course, supervisory roles have remained vacant for a period of time, which is a concern. And then the one thing is eligible. Has the department taken steps to create a list or pool of certified eligible individuals for each of the vacant positions?
With regards to hiring, we don't develop the list. That is the Department of Administration. What happens is we do cut a GG1 or process a GG1, which is basically a document which is indicates the position and the amount of the salary or the wage for the individual. That form gets transmitted to BBMR. Then that form, after it's certified, I guess, for funding, gets transmitted to the Department of Administration. But we do not develop lists for positions.
Yeah, because I see ads in the paper from UOG. They're looking for applicants. They're developing a pool of applicants. So, Director Byrne, is that something that DRT can do? Is they put out an ad saying we're looking for a pool of eligible candidates for a position? Is that something that they can do, that you can assist with?
Yes, Senator. In fact, that's exactly what DOA has done in recruiting accountants, is that we have been in touch with UOG, and some of the applicants we're having come to DOA are coming out of their intern program. As the director said, We are kind of really unique in that we, as line agencies, require qualified accountants or trained accountants, but we are restrained by these compensation schedules. We've often discussed in other forums here the difficulty of competing with some of the autonomous agencies who recruit from us and are able to pay more for a job that generally consists of less stress and less content. So we're constantly looking at that. And if I could just emphasize the problem the director's having, I've just got an accountant 1 that I believe has been offered an accountant 3 position in another agency. So I have to compete with that too.
But have there been steps to create this potential pool? Or basically, are you just, what I'm understanding you're saying is that you're recruiting, but is there like an ongoing recruitment list that they could potentially open it up positions to?
Not as yet, Senator. It's a very new project, but the goal is that we would be able to identify potential candidates before they actually graduate and make sure that when they do graduate, we can ensure, because they obviously want a job, that there's a job waiting for them when they graduate and there's not a big recruitment gap.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next item. If we can put up the slide quickly. So the next one is non-competitive hiring, limited term appointments. And so in the personnel rules and regs, these are temporary, these are limited term appointments are to be made to fill temporary vacancies in permanent positions where there are no eligible or sufficient amount of eligibles for that particular position. The appointment shall not be made until the director certifies a candidate is qualified, and it must be made for a specific period not to exceed 1 year. These appointments are made without competition, and it states that unclassified appointments limited term appointments are unclassified appointments and may be terminated at any time prior to the expiration of the year, and so on and so forth. So next slide. So we know that DRT has, in the most recent budget, there were 35 LTAs listed in the director's office alone, 32 collection agents. How were this number determined? How did you determine this number to put in your budget?
Likely it was based on the actual headcount that we had, Senator Perez.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The actual headcount that we had probably in our currently the positions that were held already.
Okay. And how was a H1 pay grade determined? And was there a consideration of parity with staff who had greater years of service that were permanized?
So with regards to the hiring of LTAs, a few things I think are important. And I know it kind of puts there's this very negative thought about LTAs, but I do have to share, because hiring is challenging, I guess it's almost like you have to look at employment or employing people in the government kind of in a different way. Because, so you did bring up the issue of we're very short-staffed, which we are. We're having issues recruiting, which we are. The LTA, I guess being able to hire as an LTA is a tool that could be used. Now, if the thought is that we only have a person for 1 year, but say we're not able to hire in a position that will cover that person, then I'm not sure if the thought is, do we have that person terminate and then try to hire another LTA person to fill the LTA position until we can hire? Because really the reality is the LTAs, and although we do have classified people, and we want all our LTAs, and we actually met with all our LTAs this year to make sure that they understand the importance of applying for classified positions, to make sure that they understand that they have to look for them and make sure that they're applying for them. but we can't make people apply. But in the meantime, as we're working to build up our workforce, there is a need for the human resource. And without having an LTA, I mean, I'd like to say, actually, I am grateful for all my employees, whether they're LTAs or they're classified employees or they're temporary, because they all help to contribute. And in fact, if we did not have LTAs in this last, I think during COVID, we wouldn't have been able to turn around the programs that we've had. A lot of them did come actually from the Department of Labor Displaced Worker Program, so we were able to pick them up. And of course, the idea was not only that we pick them up as LTAs, but eventually we would be able to have them, go through the proper process to become classified. And as I mentioned, or we mentioned earlier, we've been slowly doing that. It's a bit of a slow process, but the goal is again to have all of our LTAs, or to reduce the number of LTAs.
Okay,
Senator,
yeah,
if I may
Go
make
ahead.
a comment, after which I hope you'll excuse me because I have a retirement to attend to. We obviously want employees to have a career in government service. We want the competitive system to work. We want to have people that stay and get the experience in government service. And you've commented about the lack of experienced people heading these various branches. And that partly is because of the difficulty of operating this competitive service. We're not alone. Almost every state and local government that I've spoken to has taken this step of using LTAs in order to get people into their civil service. In our case at DOA, we were faced with having to set up 2 completely new sections for ERA and HAF, and the use of LTAs to do that and staff it up in order to pay out these benefits short-circuited the competitive process that takes, in some cases, because of this issue I referred to earlier of insufficient lists, it takes sometimes up to 9 months to fill positions. We certainly at DOA, and I understand at DRT too, encourage those who are LTA, currently holding LTA positions, to apply for permanent positions in the government, and we've had a fair amount of success in that. And we will continue. We actually talk to our employees that are LTAs and ask them to consider applying for permanent jobs. But we obviously have a vested interest in keeping those that we know in the agency. So we ask them obviously to apply for jobs within our agency, and I'm sure Director Shimizu does the same. So I don't actually see a change. This change to states and governments using LTAs seems to be a growing trend. Partly it reflects the, and I recently met with all the state chief administrators, and one of the presenters was talking about the Gen Z attitude to employment. Partly it reflects the Gen Z attitude to employment of wanting to be less tied down. Whereas, when I started on my career, the idea of having a job potentially for life was very attractive to me. It isn't to Gen Z people. So we have to react to the pool of people whom we're trying to recruit, and that's what we're trying to do.
All right, so the thing is, we're talking about professional positions. These are professional positions within, an IRS type of entity. And, that of course, they're generational changes, but I'm sure there's effects that has on the sustainability of this organization, and especially with very critical information that we're relying on temporary workers, right? Potential temporary workers, when rather for the security of the information that's being provided. I think, permanent. What is your take? Should there be more a permanent workforce in DRT or a temporary workforce at DRT?
Well, we absolutely want to reduce the number of LTAs, and which is why we met with our LTAs to make sure that they are aware that they need to be looking for those positions. And in a perfect world, Senator Perez, in a perfect world, we would be able to fill all of our positions timely, and we'd be able to fill all our positions, period. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world that we have to deal with, and sometimes laws can cause impediments and challenges. But, you know, again, as I mentioned, you know, and as the director Byrne mentioned, sometimes it could take 9 months. I will tell you, 9 months actually might be even short. Sometimes it may take longer, and again,
Okay,
it depends.
So in regards to these LTAs that were hired, were they rehired from previous employment as an LTA?
And just to share with you, when we came in 2019, perhaps unlike what maybe other administrations had done, we actually kept our LTAs. We kept our LTAs for the whole purpose, which is continuity. In fact, as I mentioned in my budget hearing, we had somebody who was with us as an LTA for 20 years. That is not the goal. The goal, and also because it shortchanges those people because they are not eligible for increments. They, you know, again, they don't have civil service rights. So, you know, again, those are things that definitely need to be addressed. And, you know, as we work on addressing the whole issue altogether of hiring in the government of Guam.
So were these positions, before bringing in temporary workers, were these positions competitively announced?
No,
to
no, they
hire?
were not competitively announced.
And why not?
Well, again, some people were already in the position, and we continue to go ahead and just I guess, turn them over, or if you would call it renew them. And so, you know, again, that's the whole. I guess that's the LTA process, right? Or the LTA tool. It allows you to go ahead and not go through the competitive process to hire somebody.
Okay, but so when you brought in the LTAs, were they then detailed to other parts of the agency?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and so why? So you're saying that those positions were not competitively?
And ma'am, that is actually you know, I have been at the Department of Revenue and Taxation for 4 years and 9 months. The change of a culture takes a long time. The Inspector General report was very interesting because if you read through it, it actually talks about what had existed in the Department of Revenue and Taxation in 2008 existed even 20 years before then. And,
Yes,
and so
I agree. Yeah, that's why I brought it up, to
right.
show that there are things that have changed, but things that haven't changed that still need to be addressed.
And I guess I know you do have your recommendations, and actually, Senator Perez, I think your recommendations are valid, and I agree that we need to work toward that.
Okay, so how are you ensuring that so let's move on to the next slide, please. So another part of non-competitive hiring is detail appointments. And so in this one, it states that a detail is a temporary assignment as needed, dependent upon the director. So no employee shall be temporarily assigned to in excess of 120 days within a calendar year. And then it goes on to say nothing in this regulation infringes upon the management's prerogative in the day-to-day operational activities. And then it goes on to say as far as payment, compensation. And so what is your understanding for an individual who's been detailed to a higher paying position, when does the higher pay kick in after detailing them to that position? Is the pay increase immediately, or is there a 30-day wait period?
My perspective, and perhaps I could be wrong, my perspective is that I think the 30-day does apply or may apply, but my perspective is that, you know, if somebody is detailed into a position that is higher or that takes on a larger role, that they should actually be paid for it. But also, if they're going to be, and we are aware that there's a likelihood that they're going to be in a position, you know, for 120 days or 90 days or whatever, that we work to process that GG1 so that way it could go through the process so that they are properly paid even prior to this, whatever the time frame is that it kicks in.
Okay, if we can put up the next slide, the next one. Okay, so in regard, so we did have information regarding detail appointments, and this is for one employee in particular. And we tried to put in a graphic form. So this individual was brought in as an employee, a classified employee, at a certain pay scale, was immediately detailed to a higher payer level, and then a day later, after the end of the assignment, had to return to that original position, but immediately was detailed again to another position, not the same position that the person was detailed to, again with the high pay. After the end of that detailed period, the pay went down, but then was immediately detailed to another higher paid position, and so on and so forth. So we're seeing consecutive detailing, and it's deliberate detailing for this particular employee, where in some ways it could be viewed as circumventing the merit system, where the individual gets a pay raise without a proper, without opening up these vacant positions to potential qualified pool of employees. And so we're talking about a level, let's say revenue agent 1, all the way up to a supervisory position. And so what is this SOPs in regards to detailing individuals to higher positions? Does this individual have to be qualified to take these detailed positions? And how is it that this individual became qualified within 1 year as a entry-level position to now a supervisory position? And wasn't this position open up to other employees of the agency before the detail happened?
Well, number one, it's difficult to answer without specifically seeing all the paperwork, so that's number one. But with regards to an SOP, perhaps that's something we need to work on. I will share with you, again, it's hard to say because I'm not entirely sure what this is, and I would have to look at perhaps all the GG1s that's relating to this in order to be able to answer your question, ma'am.
But how is this person certified? Because
so
we're looking at
go ahead.
merit-based.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
entry level to supervisory, and then
Ma'am, I
back
actually
to
have
entry
absolutely
level.
no idea who you're talking about, so I couldn't say, and I would actually need to look at the documents. But I do want to say, similar to I think what you had alluded to earlier, every single person who's hired as an LTA must actually be qualified, and we do go through the process of submitting people's applications and resumes to the Department of Administration for them to be certified as qualified or not, or qualified for certain positions before they're hired.
Okay, so that's a concern because, in addition to limited term appointments, right, where it's circumventing the competitive hiring practices, once they're in the agency, now there's another practice happening, which is detailing these individuals to higher paying positions. And so here we're seeing another circumventing of the merit-based system, where an individual can get an increase in pay without recruitment, hiring for qualified individuals. The assumption is that, I guess the question is, or the question remains is, did this individual, obviously the position should have been open up, period, for a supervisory position. And how is it that other individuals who've been working in DRT, more experience, or perhaps other candidates outside of the agency who have the expertise, how are they not looked for over this detailed person?
Well, what I can say, and again, coming out of all of this discussion, is that we definitely need to look at all of our positions, and if, like for example, with regards to our revenue agent, which reverted from a K to a J in 2014, needs to be adjusted back up, then we need to work on that. And actually, a while ago, I don't know if it was last year, ma'am, you had asked about all of our position description qualifications, basically our job descriptions. We actually went through the process in anticipation of a pay study, a detailed pay study. We went in, through the process of reviewing, and you were provided with 100%, I believe, of our position description qualifications. So we actually went through the process of reviewing position descriptions and also job qualifications, and you received all of that a while ago. So we did that, I'm not sure if it was last May or the prior May.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the PDQs are not similar for an entry level to a supervisory position. And so this is a practice, I think that's problematic, that needs to be addressed.
So, thank you, Senator, so noted.
Okay, this is not the only employee. We found other cases where this practice is happening. Employee is entry level, gets then detailed to a supervisory position. At the end of the period of temporary detail, they got returned to their original position, but then immediately detailed to a supervisory or higher paying position. So this is not just one example. There are other examples that we see that is happening, which is problematic again because one of the reasons why, I think this is perhaps morale is affected, and also not only that is the performance or output. It affects the output of the agency.
And one thing I do want to mention, which was not in place before, was that for all of our limited term appointees, what we have implemented in this year is an actual performance evaluation. And again, this is not a performance evaluation that allows them for an increment, but is a performance evaluation that at least helps us to identify people who are outstanding or not, where people need to be, where it's not merited or we really should not renew a limited term appointee. So we actually have worked to develop such thing, again, so that we can make sure that we're constantly communicating with people about their performance, and we make sure that we address as needed.
Okay, we can go back to the slide. So next slide. So these are the other examples. Next slide. Okay, so the other non-competitive process is hiring retirees. And of course, was any attempt made by management to recruit competitively before hiring retirees? I understand there was difficulty, but even upon hiring retirees, was there any effort to continually to seek competitive placement?
So since I've been at the department, we have hired 3 retirees, I believe. And with regards to, and just to share with you, the reason why it's important, or the reason why retirees may be a good option. And in fact, what we're doing even in tax enforcement, Senator Perez, is we're looking at the opportunity or the option of hiring retirees. It's not ideal. It's something that even at GPD, they actually also are employing that. Again, it's because people have the institutional knowledge. And in a situation like we are, you know what, that's something that we may need. The areas that we've hired, again, retirees are areas that, we were able to get someone who was interested in coming back and who actually in an area where we need, and frankly, we need in almost every area.
Yeah, I understand the benefits, right? Especially to bring back the institutional knowledge. But again, the point is there any effort by management to competitively fill these positions?
Right, and so, I will share with you, our hiring process is not perfect. We do need to go back and revisit, the GG1s. Again, we have 34. We need to work on making sure that we identify and we hire in the areas that our administrators have advised are important. And again, those are things that will be doing, and we thank you for your point.
Yeah, thank you for that. So next slide, please. Okay, so we did FOIA documents regarding the hiring of DRT employees from 2020 to current year. And so we did an analysis. There were, of the, predominantly, I believe there was 200 personnel actions that consisted of, so there are multiple personal actions for an employee at this point. So predominantly over this 3-year period, there were predominantly temporary workers, temporary hires. There were also these were the detailed appointments. So a lot of, again, non-competitive practices. And there were some permanent employees, which in this case were unclassifieds. Some transfers within the agency, some transfers from another agency. So if you look at this data from this three-year period, it's pretty conclusive that the type of hiring that's happening at Department of Revenue and Taxation are temporary hires, and those that are permanent are unclassified predominantly. And so this I believe has impacts to the functioning of the agency. Considering this agency, does a lot of the work for the island, and I think it's really critical that this needs to change. There needs to be a change to developing a eligible pool of workers, permanent pool of workers, for the work the sensitive work that's being done. To have such a turnaround of employees is concerning. As a taxpayer, we are relying on the security of our information, very, very sensitive information, on a temporary workforce. And, I know my office has been in communication with you in regards to how to build this workforce. Definitely would like to continue to do that. Next slide. Another issue is overtime. So how much overtime do you know was paid annually from 2018 to 2023 for each division?
I don't have those numbers, ma'am.
Okay, and then frequency of overtime?
We we have actually had ongoing overtime, and of course that's not ideal. So the situation we are in is this: we're short-staffed. We have a lot of work to do. We're working to hire, and again, it's not. In an ideal world, we could work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we would be able to get all our work done, and we would have everybody in our agency that we would have all positions filled. The world that we live in is we are short-staffed. We have a lot of work to do. We're trying to get caught up, and of course, as we work to collect, which is, of course, the topic of this particular oversight hearing, the issue of overtime is necessary as we work to try to make sure that we get caught up. Those are things that we're working to do, but I don't have that. And really, we've actually reduced our overtime significantly. Where we had a lot of overtime really was a lot during COVID. And then we've slowly been kind of weaning, it's been waning. But we do still have overtime. We have overtime, I think, that goes through this weekend for this fiscal year, and we're going to be revisiting to see whether or not the workload requires additional overtime as we come into the next fiscal year.
The current budget, there was zero budgeted for overtime. So, I mean, this doesn't add up to what you're saying. So are you expecting not to have overtime this year?
Well, so I think I actually went back to look at our budget hearing so I can, I guess, recall some of the discussions. But with regards to the budget, again, we have finite resources. It's not a line item budget. As long as we try to work well within our budget, and of course, we ourselves don't even manage our budget. Anything that we do, including overtime, has to be approved by the BBMR. And so, what we do is, again, there's a check and balance on what we do, that it falls within the, the budget. We do intend to have overtime, Senator Perez, and perhaps what we're going to need to do is maybe make sure that as we do our budget, we break that out better. But it was not broken out in our budget.
Yeah, because there is an itemized line in the budget submittals, and previous years it was, in 2022, it was 756,000. 2023, it was 270, and now it went down to 0.
Okay.
So,
thank you. Yes, thank you, and noted.
so basically, it wasn't accurate, is what you're saying.
So again, the budget is a projection. The budget is our best guess estimate, and perhaps what should have happened in the preparation of the budget is that there should have been an allocation for overtime, and so we'll note that for the next year's budget.
Yeah. So the concern, though, is because it's not budgeted, that means it's being taken out somewhere. So which division is that going to come out of, and which vacancies are not going to be filled? So,
Yes.
there's cascading effects.
Thank you, Senator Perez.
But we will reach out in regards to overtime use. I think, like you said in one of the hearings, that you were hearing that employees were feeling a sense of burnout.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, yeah, we would like to definitely get more clarification on how overtime is being used
Sure.
and how much, if there's a way to prevent that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item, training. How regular are trainings in DRT? Is there funding available for that? When was the last IRS training scheduled for staff?
So the last time the IRS came to Guam was in 2019. So in 2019, when I came in board, we had sent 4 people to federal law enforcement training program, I think in South Carolina, somewhere in the East Coast. That was the first time in 20 years that anybody had been sent to training for FLETC. We brought over to Guam 2 IRS revenue officer trainings. That's our collections branch. They were here for, I think, 3 to 4 weeks. And we had our collections branch, our revenue officers, attend 8 to 5. Not all of them, of course, but attend 8 to 5. And that was a beginner level training for revenue officers. We, through a Department of Interior TAP grant that was awarded, we do have monies for another revenue officer training and a revenue agent training. And the revenue agent training is a little bit harder to find an IRS person to come out, but we've already actually solidified the dates for the revenue officer training, which will happen next year beginning, I think, the week of January 21. So we're excited about that. And again, the last time we had that revenue officer training was 2019. This time, I believe the revenue officer training will not be the entry level like we did last time. It will be an advanced, which is going to be great because then the people who took the entry level will be able to take the advanced training. As Deputy Director Lizama mentioned, we actually internally did a code of conduct training, again, so people are aware of what's required of them, where they could look to in the rules and regs, the Department of Administration rules and regs about behavior, about, again, various things regarding personnel. So that's something that we started. And as Deputy Director Lizama mentioned, over 90% of our employees had attended that. And again, that was something that we did internally. And, of course, there are things that we're going to need to do in terms of additional training, but those plans are things that we need to work to discuss further.
I just wanted to add that I believe there is training coming up with customs. So we are, I believe it happens every time there's a new cycle, and so they are going to get trained with regard to use tax.
Right, and that's where we actually go, and we're the trainers for that cycle.
All right, thank you. I know we're running out of time today, but I just want to maybe, there's another thing happening, so we might have to recess, but I just want to finish up a couple things. Next slide, please. Successional planning, sorry, previous slide. So how many employees are due to retire in the next year, 2 or 3 years from now? Do you have an understanding of that?
I don't have the number, ma'am, but I do know that we do have quite a few employees who are eligible to retire already or who will be eligible soon.
Okay, what has management done to prevent institutional loss of knowledge, knowing that there are those that are going to retire soon?
So with regards to planning for succession, of course, it is very important. What we have been doing, again, is working to try to recruit. Of course, the people who we do have with us, and that is why we've actually had to bring back people as retirees to help us to be able to have our, the technical expertise that we do need in our agency. But definitely succession planning is something that we need to look into more so that way we can make sure that we have proper succession planning. Because unlike in the private sector, what I've seen in the government or my experience has been, generally, even people themselves, they have to make appointments with the retirement Guam Retirement Fund in order for them to be able to even find out exactly when they can retire. We've had some people advise us of retirement within 2 weeks of their retirement. Some people keep, they've been saying they're retired, but then they don't retire. And so again, some of those kind of dynamics make it a little bit difficult, but yes, you're right, that we need to work on succession planning, and that's something that we'll take note of.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to have to table this oversight because there is some other areas. And in fact, I did send an RFI, which you did reply, but it wasn't complete. So maybe at the next hearing, the information can be more complete and we can go over and also follow up on anything that was discussed today.
Might I be able to make some statements, though, Senator Perez, before we close?
Yeah, I haven't closed yet, just yet.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so the other half was more of the, so historically there has been information that's been collected as far as the output of the agency. And so I pretty much emulated that template and asked you to provide that information. So we'll follow up with that one, as well as talk about status updates regarding collections. We're looking at tobacco taxes, alcohol, and others. But I think ultimately, you know, I guess the key points from this oversight is really it's important to address the staffing issues. And some of the recommendations I feel that have come out of this, I think that our key is really looking to basically establish a permanent employee workforce at DRT. I know that you've taken steps to fill vacancies, but I think it's really important to look at more of a permanent workforce. And some of the ways that, you know, obviously is looking to build up the eligible pool of candidates, you know, partnering with UOG, GCC to develop those programs, right? What you mentioned is working with DOA to reassess the J pay grade to a K for the revenue agents, revenue agent 1. Maybe initiating a pay plan study for DRT and other related fields. I think institute regular trainings, fill key leadership positions, and really to curb non-competitive hiring practices. So yeah, so you're welcome to make any statements at this time.
And thank you so much, Senator Perez, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you for allowing me the time to also make a statement as well. Frankly, I just really want to extend my appreciation and my thanks to my team for all their hard work, for all they've done and continue to do every day to serve our people, for their sacrifices throughout the last 4 years and 9 months that I've been at the Department of Revenue and Taxation, for missing dinners with their family, for missing parties, for the missed lunches or the skipped lunches as they worked, and for the smiles that they actually managed to have even when faced with some pretty huge challenges. I want to thank them for believing in me, for their advice, for their compassion, for their understanding, for their patience, for their love, and for working to do things which have never been done ever in the history of our government. When people told me, Daph, there is no way you will ever have a portal to check the status of your refunds, or pay refunds by direct deposit, or expand the online Form 1040, or pay refunds in weeks as opposed to months and months, or turn around programs back to back to back to get out $500 million in aid to our people. I want to thank them for believing in me when they themselves probably had reservations about whether things could really be done. But they stood by me when we launched the portal to check the status of our refunds, when we launched the portal that they could check the status of their EIP and all RISE program payments, when we received over 16,000 applications for all RISE in a single day. And they are the reason that anything in our agency has ever been accomplished. And I am grateful to have the honor of working side by side with them every single day. And I actually truly love them very much. I also thank you, Senator Perez, for taking my call the other day and for understanding that it would be difficult for us to provide the information which was requested for as of today's hearing. I have to say I was very concerned and worried when I found out you were going to hold a hearing, as I mentioned, because on this particular topic we had not discussed it before. And as I mentioned, however, you know, of course, my primary concern is making sure, and I know this is yours as well, that we do our best not just to work to achieve things, but we work to achieve things together. It was also concerning when we saw the information request which was provided to us, as it's clear that it's very likely that there's someone from our agency, or maybe even someone who's left our agency that provided the information to you. And if it is true, it's just, I wanted to remind them that, you know, whatever communication that they have is, they need to make sure that, of course, we all took the oath of full disclosure, and we have a responsibility to safeguard taxpayer information. So I hope that they have not provided taxpayer information or information which would prevent us from being able to properly regulate and carry out our mandates. And if it is true, I would like to say to that person or those people that I really hope that they find some peace, and I really wish them blessings, because I will tell you, my mom would always say, hurt people hurt people. I also want to take the time to apologize to them if I've hurt them in some way, because for people who actually know me, if you know me, well, you know that I would not do, for the most part, I would not do something on purpose to hurt you. So if I may have hurt someone, I apologize. But in closing, again, I wanted to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, which is I'm just very thankful for my team, for all the hard work. They're the reason why I'm sitting here today and able to answer these questions. They do all of the work, and everything that we've ever accomplished in this particular agency is really because of all of their hard work. And again, thank you, Senator Perez, for your comments, and for actually really taking the time to put together a very thorough presentation so that we can come up with recommendations and work together. Sitas Masi.
Right. I just want to thank you, Director Shimizu, too, as well. I know you've been through a lot in these past years, especially during the pandemic, and you stuck with it. So, I mean, I'm not, taking that away from you. But I just want to also, for the record, share that this information was gotten from FOIA documents from DOA. So, and it's nothing, basically it's about how to improve this agency. And we're basically seeing very concerning trends with the staffing and personnel matters, or how things are being handled internally, which has implications and effects for the agency. And so we would like to work with the agency to continue addressing these issues. These are very serious issues. And, I'm, definitely, like, I've met with the management before on this. It's like, how do we develop, just like, GPD, how they're developing their training cycle. How can we emulate what's happening elsewhere in the government to ensure that we have a stable workforce within DRT. And this is the point of this oversight, is to really highlight the areas of weaknesses, and not to show the weakness, but to show how we can improve. I mean, that's really the bottom line, is to make things better, right? Senator Barnett, if you have any final thoughts or questions? Okay. So again, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for showing up today, and I hope if we do continue the hearing that we come better prepared with the data that we can openly discuss, so we can move forward. I think with the staffing, for me, when you take away who the director is or what the agency is, this is something we see across the board in the government of Guam, and I think it's frustrating for tenured employees in the classified system to stand there or work there and watch these LTAs pass them by and circumvent all the processes. And I'll tell you, that's why we get these calls from these people who, and it's the same song and dance. Oh, I applied at the agency, last year. I never got a call back. In the meantime, we're hiring, 50 million LTAs. So I don't think it's an issue specific to DRT, but I do see it as a way for the line agencies to play favorites or otherwise award the people that they want to award. I'm not making that allegation in this case. I'm just saying generally that's been my experience and what I've seen. So thank you, Madam Chair, for all the presentation, the information that you shared here. I think that you opened a lot of boxes that are going to warrant us going back to check the contents of at a later date. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Barnett, and thank you to Director and Deputy Director for being here, and to all the staff, for this morning, taking time out of your busy schedule to be here this morning. So at this time, the committee will recess this oversight hearing. The time is now, before I say that, if anyone wishes to send any written testimony, please do so. You can email it to office@senatorperez.org. or you can drop it off the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building. And so we are now going to recess. The time is now 12:10 p.m. Thank you so much.